pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in compliance with NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act, and in accord with DCA guidelines related to the functioning of virtual meetings, this regularly scheduled meeting of the Jackson Township Board of Adjustment has been published and posted in all appropriate locations.
Thank you, Mr. Gertner. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Costanzo?
Here.
Ms. Fritsch?
She's not, oh, there she is. Okay, good timing.
Mr. Hurley? Ms. McElhenney is absent this evening. Ms. Camello is absent. Ms. Russell? Mr. Najarian?
Present.
Mr. Book?
Here. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, we could make note of this historic night, evening. Ms. Russell is sitting this evening as our member, number 7.
All right. Okay, with that, do we have any resolutions for approval this evening?
There is one on the wrong page. Resolution 2021-09, Port Cohen, Block 12001, Lots 3, 6, and 7, 100 West Veterans Highway, granting a variance for a preliminary major site plan approval with bulk variance relief and a subdivision approval. Eligible are Mr. Costanzo, Ms. Fritsch, Mr. Hurley, Mr. Najarian, Mr. Book.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Costanzo?
Yes.
Ms. Fritsch? Yes. Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Book?
Yes. You said that was our only resolution for this evening?
Yes.
Do we have any minutes for approval?
There are minutes from March 3rd, and I'm not sure if everybody received March 17th. They were sent later today.
All right, I saw the ones from the 3rd, the 17th came in late. Did anybody have an opportunity to read the ones from the 3rd? Are we ready to move on to 3rd? How about on the 17th? No? Okay, so the 17th, we're going to put off till the next meeting, but as to the minutes for the 3rd, can I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Costanzo?
Yes.
Ms. Fritsch? Yes. Mr. Hurley? Yes. Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Book?
Yes. Okay. Moving on to vouchers, I have 2, one for Danielle Sinowitz for $150 and another invoice for King Reporting for $250. Can I have a motion and a second to approve and pay the bills?
You got a motion to pay the bills?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Costanzo?
Yes.
Ms. Fritsch? Yes. Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Ms. Russell? Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Book?
Yes, thank you. All right, item H on our calendar is an announcement in regards to Gary Miller. Spoke briefly with Mr. Gertner on this. Mr. Gertner is going to walk us through the technicality as to what's actually going on with Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gertner?
This is just a simple announcement reminding the board and any members of the public that this matter had been carried without the need for notice to the May 5th, 2021 meeting. So we make that announcement again. Gary Mayer, application number 11407, it's in block 11407, lot 2, is carried to the May 5, 2021 meeting without the need for further notice.
Thank you, Mr. Gertner. All right, looking at the calendar, I see nothing else in terms of matters for discussion or administrative approvals. So then we're going to move on to applications. But before we do that, I would appreciate our professionals being sworn. And then if you would be so kind, professionals, introduce yourself.
So, gentlemen, raising your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information, questions, comments, or testimony you're about to present before the board will be and represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Mr. Peters, can you begin, please?
Out of order. Ernie Peters, Board Planner.
Evan Hill, Board Engineer.
Jeffrey Paporo, zoning officer.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, with no further ado, we'll move on to our applications. First applicant up is Anthony and Colleen Scamato, and please excuse me if I mispronounced your name. Mr. Scamato?
Good evening. Thank you. You pronounce
How do you, well, we'll get a chance
Scamato's
to
right.
teach us.
Yes.
you're raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and then your address, please? And then you can, through the chair, begin the application process.
Sure. My full name's Anthony Scamato. Spell my last, Sgammato. My address is 3 Whispering Grove Boulevard in Jackson.
Good evening, Mr. Scamato. As you know, there's a certain level of difficulty in hearing, and so to the best of your ability, if you would speak as clearly and as distinctly as you can into that microphone, that would be greatly appreciated for all that are here as well as the public. All right, and as I look quickly at your application, it tells us that you are proposing a shed at 3.1 foot from the side yard property line where 15 feet minimum is required. Why do you want it there, and what is the problem?
That's correct. My yard is very, very wet, sir.
It's very what?
Wet, wet, always very wet. In fact, on the other side of the yard, there's a gigantic drain. We have a lake in my development. At times, the lake backs up into the drain. Most of the water from the neighborhood actually comes through much of my yard. So this is where I would like the shed to be.
Right, so the shed is not there now.
The shed is there, correct, sir. No,
Is
no.
there?
The shed is currently in place.
Your plan of pool as built survey that you provided with your application, does that accurately reflect where it is located?
Yes, sir.
And you have a pool and everything else that's on there is already there and built
Yep.
into the
Yes,
into the
sir.
property? And the flooding, as you described, would impact your shed if it was not in that location?
It comes through a lot of the back of the yard
Yes.
where all the trees are, and then it comes out the other side as well. So it's very, very wet.
I have no further questions of the applicant. Board members, any questions of the
If I
applicant?
may, through the chair.
Yes.
Sir, can we have a description of the shed itself, its size?
It's a 96 square foot shed,
So that approximately is what by what,
8 by 12.
8 by 12? Is that on a concrete slab?
No concrete, no,
Is there any type of utility, electrical, gas going to that shed?
no.
And what's the intended usage of the shed?
Just to store toys, floats, things of that nature.
No further questions.
Anything further from other members? No? Professionals, any questions or concerns of the applicant? No? Any further testimony, sir?
No, sir.
All right, then with that, I'm going to close this portion of the hearing. I'm going to move it on to the public session. Is there anybody from the public that would like to be heard on this application? There's no one here in the room, and Anthony, I'm not seeing any, I see 32 participants on the screen, but I'm not seeing anybody interested in speaking on this application. Do you agree? All right, thank you. Then with that, I'm going to close the public portion. Board members, the application is ours. Any thoughts, concerns, or a motion?
I'll make a motion. Based on his hardship of the flooding and the location of the shed, I'm going to make a motion to accept this application the way it is.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Costanzo?
Yes.
Ms. Fritsch? Yes. Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Ms. Russell? Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Book?
Yes. Your application's approved, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome. Okay, that brings us to application number 2. Soha and Hassan Zidan. Excuse me if I mispronounced your name. Variance 3359. Good evening, Mr. Zidan.
Good evening.
Sir, if you can raise first before you're right, thank you. Difference in height. I have that problem on the other side too. You raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present to the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and through the chair, explain why you're here?
Full name is Hassan Zidan. Last name spelled Zidan. Address 17 Victoria Circle, Jackson.
Okay. It's Mr. Zidan. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Excuse me. Again, Mr. Zidan, to the best of your ability, speak as loudly and as clearly as you can into the microphone.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the document provided with your application, and I'm reading it on 10/19/2020. Apparently, you installed an in-ground pool at 14.2 feet from the rear yard property line, where 15 feet minimum is required. That resulted in a violation. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
All right. Is there a reason why you installed the pool in violation of that setback?
Actually, that was a mistake during the constructions. There's a 17, I believe 17 feet out by 60 pavers behind the house. So that was the only location that we could put the pool in at exactly 15 feet from the rear of the property. After the construction was done, we went to get the as-built survey, and they found out that it was 14.2 instead.
So at this point, I take it there is no practical or reasonable way of moving everything to make it correct at 15.
That is
So we
correct.
have this relatively minor deviation, and you're here to clean that up. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Chairman, I think just one item for the record. I think you indicated this, but just to make certain. To the best of your knowledge, you or your contractor did in fact obtain all necessary permits, grading and drainage plans. You're shaking your head, yes, but let me ask the question first. To install that pool, correct?
That is correct.
So that from a construction perspective, even though that pool is there, it's really, as the chairman has indicated, this is a cleanup application, either from a mistaken measurement or likewise. You're here now because the as-built reflected the fact that the deviation. That's correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Board members, any questions? Any further? Yes.
If I may, through the chair, I just want to assist the applicant. Are you proposing any sheds
No,
moving forward?
no,
Because now would be your time to ask for that.
not at the time being, no.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions of the applicant from the board? Nothing. Professionals, any issues? No issues. Do you have any further testimony?
No, sir.
All right, that'll close that portion. I'm going to open it to the public. All right, so Anthony, again, I'm seeing 35 participants, 32 attendees, but I'm not seeing any hands or indication from anybody anywhere that they wish to be heard in this application. Do you agree? Thank you, Anthony. Public portion is closed. Board members, it's ours. Any thoughts, deliberations, or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve this application.
We have a second? Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Roll call, please.
Mr. Costanzo?
Yes.
Ms. Fritsch? Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Ms. Russell? Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Book?
Yes. Thank you, sir. Your application is approved.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you. All right, number 3 on the calendar is Milos Madar, variance 3364. Good evening, Mr. Madar.
Kindly raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please? And then through the chairman, he'll ask you, to the best of your ability, to describe why you're here.
Okay. My name is Milos Madar, Madar, and address is 810 Miller Avenue here in Jackson.
Good evening, Mr. Madar. You probably heard me say to the other applicants, again, because of acoustics, it's very much appreciated if you'd speak as clearly and as loudly as you can into the microphone.
Okay.
As I'm looking at the documents that were provided, you have an application here for zoning permit, but let's see, on 11/4/2020, you were proposing an addition at 55.4 feet to the front yard property line where 60 feet minimum is required. Can you tell me why you're looking for permission to do that?
We just want to do small addition like the mudroom because front access to our house is just exactly to the living room. And we just want to do some like small like a mudroom for putting the shoes down, you know, because everything, you know, it's muddy, you know, at the front. And any different way to our house is from the garage or from the backyard. And we just want to do this.
Okay. Admittedly, some of that testimony got lost. All right. It was very hard to hear. You spoke quickly and my ears don't work that fast. So,
I don't speak very good English too, you
and
know.
a little bit
I
more
understand.
slowly, if you can. There is a diagram that you presented. I don't know if Anthony can put that up on the screen. Okay. And at least the diagram that we see shows that you want to put this concrete stoop and steps in the front of your house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to our engineer, Evan Hill. He's going to ask you some questions to help us all get some clarity as to exactly what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Hill?
Hi, good evening. So yeah, the plans submitted by the applicant indicate that he's proposing to remove the existing masonry steps and stoop leading to the front door and replacing it with a new vestibule, which is proposed to be fully enclosed with a roof, so it's part of the principal structure. This is not a deck, this is not a covered porch, this is a house addition. The addition extends 10 feet from the front of his house, and it's 10 feet wide with a side entry door and new sidewalk. It's important to note when this lot was created back in 1977, the front yard setback requirement at that time was 40 foot. It is currently 60 feet. The applicant is proposing to construct this new vestibule, which would result in a 55.4 foot setback to the property line, as opposed to 60.
So the house is already there. The
Correct.
house is already there.
And the house currently is 65 feet from the property line, but he's encroaching into that setback 4.6 feet.
Is that accurate, Mr. Medor?
Yes.
All right. Board members, any other questions for Mr. Medor?
What are you gonna use this for, sir?
It's just access to the house. Like I'm said, it's like mudroom for putting shoes down, clothing, you know.
Mr. Medor, are you building this yourself?
No.
You're going to hire a contractor to
Yes.
do it?
Yes.
All right. In terms of what it's going to look like and what you're going to build it out of, can you tell us a whole lot more about that so that you can give us, the board, and the public, if they're listening, a sense of what it's going to look like? And is it going to be consistent with the house? And is it going to look similar? So give us an idea, if that makes sense to you. We would like to hear from you what your intention is in terms of what this is going to look like.
I don't know what we want to hear, how it's gonna be look like, you know. We just want to, you know, I don't know how to explain to you, you know. We just want to do small addition just for us, you know, I don't know what you want to hear from me, you know.
All right. I'm gonna ask my engineer again to help us out on this. So back
I
to Mr.
understand.
Hill. He's gonna walk you through.
Yep. So based on the architectural plans that you submitted as part of your application, what we see is a 10 by 10, a 10 foot by 10 foot building addition at the center of your home. The drawings indicate that you will have new vinyl siding to match the existing home. It'll have a flat roof, fiberglass roof with a railing on top, a decorative railing on
Yes.
top. And then a new front door, side entry door of typical size. So based on the architectural plans, it appears that it'll be consistent with the existing home.
Okay, thank you. Is that all correct, Mr. Medor? You
Yes.
agree, yes?
Yes, no, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Board members, any additional questions of is it Ms. Dor or Madar?
Madar.
Madar, I'm sorry, of Mr. Madar? Nothing further from the board. Professionals, any additional questions or concerns of Mr. Madar? Nothing further from our professionals. Mr. Madar, do you have any further testimony?
No.
No? All right, in that case, I'll close that portion, open it to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to be heard on this application? Okay, Anthony, it's you and me again. I don't see anybody. 38 participants, 35 attendees. Nothing's jumping up at me from the public. Anthony, do you agree? Thanks, Anthony. All right, I'm going to close this portion of the hearing. Okay, board members, it's ours. Do we have any deliberations, concern, or a motion?
I'll make that motion to approve this application because he has 55.4 and 60 is required, so I don't see an issue with that. Motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, your application's approved. Thank you, Mr. Madar.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You're welcome. Okay. Okay, application number 4, Cardinality Jackson Crossing. Good evening, Mr. Alfieri.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicants. We're here this evening for an amended preliminary and final site plan approval and use variance, bulk variance approval for Adventure Crossing Phase 1. Ian Borden, when he comes up to testify, will give you a little more history as to how this project has been previously approved. However, just preliminarily, the applicant did receive preliminary and final site plan approval from the planning board for the project that is very similar to what you're seeing tonight. The amendment includes a use that is not a permitted use in the zone, and therefore it triggers a D variance, and that's why we're here tonight for the approval rather than going to the planning board for the amended approval. Ian will give you a lot more detail as to how this project has evolved. We have several witnesses, engineering, planning, traffic, energy, and Mr. Cardinality, who will start the testimony. I believe, yes, he's here. And Vito will be the first witness. I know there are several new board members from when we were here for a GDP approval several years back. So we're going to try and run through the entire detail of this application so that those board members who didn't hear it before will understand it. And I apologize for those of you who may be hearing it more than once.
General, that would be helpful. The overview and the background is appreciated. Thank you.
Vito. Vito Cardinality is going to be our first witness. He's a principal of the applicant.
Mr. Cardinality, you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, you have to please use the microphone because we have people listening. Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and Mr. Alfieri made the representation as to your affiliation with the applicant.
Vito Cardinality,
Address, Vito?
265 Disbrough Hill Road, Millstone, New Jersey.
And Mr. Cardinality, I indicated to the board that you were a principal of the applicant entity. Is that correct?
Correct.
And your company actually owns the property which is the subject of this application?
Correct.
Can you give the board a little history as to what your vision is for the Adventure Crossing project and in particular the MS Center?
Thank you. The project basically is more than just a sports and entertainment facility. Some of you may know that I was instrumental in putting the MS Center at Center State, which was named after my late wife, who passed away from MS. So our goal here in this project is not only to deliver a sports and entertainment project, but we're also looking to build an MS research center, which will employ over 100 people, 80,000 square feet, and it'll be right on the site. The profits from this project will go to funding the MS research center so that for any reason I leave this earth before it's gone, the project will continue to be funding the MS research.
And during the GDP application that was presented to this board, you did have this MS Research Center at a different location, is that correct?
Correct. Originally, the property, it's approximately 300 acres. It was in another phase of the project. And we have moved the research center over into this phase, which is closer to the road. I believe a better location, and certainly will be put up much earlier than it would have been in the original GDP.
And can you describe for the board the current status of construction of this phase one?
Currently, we're working on fixing the roads. The jug handle that's there currently on the project across from the Wawa is going to be eliminated. It'll be a larger jug handle that will go deeper into the project to relieve some of the traffic on 537. We have signed up some tenants. We have a 7-Eleven, a Taco Bell, a Popeye. We're in lease negotiation with Jersey Mike's, with Starbucks. We're also fully leased on our baseball fields and our soccer fields in the back. We hope to have those up and running by September, October. Obviously, between COVID and weather, that's really a big part of it. So yes, we are moving, we're breaking ground. As you could see, much of the property is cleared, but we've started our project.
And there's also 2 hotels that are proposed?
Correct. We have a Hilton and a Marriott signed up, which both will be sharing a 100,000 square foot convention center. The goal is to bring conventions here. We're not looking to compete with Jacob Javits, but we certainly believe that New Jersey and with all the other things that we have at this location, we're a destination. So between the families who are traveling with their travel teams, the thing that we hear the most is there's really nothing to do when they're there with the lacrosse team or the fencing team. What do they do? What else can they do? Look what we have to offer. We have Six Flags. We have the outlets. We're 30 minutes from Philadelphia. We have some of the most beautiful beaches down in 195. This will be a destination. Families will come here for many reasons because they'll have access to all these things. But when they do find out that the profits and a lot of the proceeds will go to MS Research, we believe that those families from Connecticut and Boston and Philadelphia, I mean, we've got a lot of different sports here. In our next application that we're submitting, we'll have even more sports than what you see on this phase.
And can you just summarize for the board, as it relates to this phase, what the recreational uses are?
We're going to have 8 hockey rinks. We'll have an indoor arena for what we hope to be different types of conventions that will utilize a dirt convention without having a full concrete flooring system. But we'll also have 5 basketball courts. We've signed up a lease with the Klatsky family. They bring 800 basketball teams here. And we're also looking to put an arena with seating so that we can have concerts.
And the rear, what is the purpose of the rear outdoor fields?
The rear outdoor fields were leased by a company named Ruthless. They are primarily girls softball and some soccer and lacrosse, and they are fully leased. And we're looking, and they were involved with the United States Women's Olympic Division. We have a very, very great tenant there who's very knowledgeable in the area and has a lot of teams currently. And he's leasing from many people in this area, but now he'll be leasing the fields here.
Thank you. And and I know you didn't get into any detail about the MS Research Center, but can you tell the board about the MS wing of Center State and how that operates?
Currently, the wing in Center State is servicing over 3,000 women. The disease affects women more than it does men. I think there's about 800 men that are getting services. So we have about 3,800 people getting service. That's where I will get a lot of the information on the research that we're doing locally. But I'm also working with the 5 hospitals in this area who have to work with us. We'll be sharing information not only with the hospitals, but I've partnered with the Mayo. I partnered with the International MS Center, Dr. Sadiq, and I'm also working with the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Our information will probably be shared live to 1,200 MS labs around the world. Our goal is to kill MS. We're not here to create the 19th drug to keep everybody taking a shot every month. The goal is to kill MS in Jackson.
And when we were here with the GDP application, Mr. Gibbons or Gribbons?
Gribbon, the president of the hospital, came on behalf of the project to, in case anybody was questioning whether our goals were our goals. And he was kind enough to come, and I think he met some of you on this board and, testified that there is an MS center. It's named after my wife, Linda Cardinality. There are over 3,000 people getting services, and he is fully aware of our relationship with the Mayo and what we'll be doing with the Mayo and partnering. The hospitals will be working very closely with us. We won't have, many live patients at the research center. It'll be working with hospitals and donation of different tissues from people with MS. And we'll get that information very quickly after someone's passed away.
Okay, that's all we have of Mr. Cardinale. We have a lot of technical testimony to come, but I wanted you to understand the vision for those of you who haven't heard it before.
Mr. Alfieri, I think I'd be remiss, having just received approval for the planning board. Can you just briefly, for Mr. Cardinale, talk about how the warehouses also fit into the overall vision and space?
Well, the warehouses are, will get access through this project, but other than the fact that they're warehouses and they're going to generate revenue, there's really no other interconnection.
When we first met the board, our goal was to put Topgolf in the location of where the warehouses were. But unfortunately, some of the people on Anderson Road didn't want that. They felt that it was a quality of life issue. So we moved the convention over to this phase that you're seeing. We eliminated the golf. We lost that tenant, couldn't wait. And we also moved the housing that was on Anderson Road. In this application, we've closed access to Anderson Road, and we're not coming out on the road. And hopefully we can satisfy the people who live there with good landscaping and protecting it. The warehouses have a very short distance of travel. As you know where the spot is, I'm sure you all do. They've got less than 600 feet to travel before they get right onto 195. Perfect spot for it.
Yeah, and as it relates to Anderson Road, when the original GDP was approved, there was a direct access point onto Anderson Road. There was an appeal filed by the Anderson Road residents. We settled that litigation. We withdrew the GDP approval as it relates to that easternmost section, and said we would come back for site plan for something different. And we agreed as part of that settlement, we would not have an access road to Anderson Road, and we do not under the warehouse approval nor under this approval. There is an emergency access to Anderson Road, which was always agreed to and contemplated with the residents. So we have fulfilled our obligation under that settlement agreement, and we continue to abide by it.
And again, just for the record, so the board understands, in the interim, and correct me on the exact timeline, in the interim, the municipality passed a ordinance which created certain permitted use, which divested this board of jurisdiction, gave that jurisdiction to the planning board. And that's why that new site plan, when I say new, that warehouse site plan was vested with the planning.
That's correct. That project was fully conforming to the new zoning ordinance, and Mr. Borden will get into the sequence of how things evolved. But yes, that was fully conforming. Here, we're primarily here because the parking garage, which you'll hear about, is not a permitted use. It's not a non-permitted use. It was just never contemplated in the zoning ordinance, so it's silent as to that structure, and therefore it triggers the D-variance relief. And that's really primarily why we're here. And there is a western section, the Vinciguerra tract. How large is that?
Approximately 150 acres, and about 75 acres of it is uplands. So we're utilizing that, and that's where we'll have the hockey and the arena and the residential apartments and a bus stop that hopefully will go to major stops where we can get employment. And we have a cross easement with Six Flags, so that when you're in Six Flags, you don't have to come out on 537 to come to us. And when you're in our location, you don't have to go out on 537 to get to Six Flags. It's a cross easement between the two of us. We'll have unmanned, solar-powered transportation back and forth so people can go from Six Flags, go back to our hotels, or else go to the rides. I think we're going to make Six Flags a 2-3 day park now.
And just for clarification, that Vincent Garrett track, which is what I'm referring to it as, your contract purchaser for that parcel, is that correct?
Correct. We are contract purchaser for Vinciguerra. We're already working on it. We're actually putting a pump station in that location right now as we speak.
Anything further, Mr. Cardinale?
That's
Nothing?
all.
Board members, any questions of Mr. Cardinale relating to his testimony? Yes, Ms. Fitch, go ahead.
The MS Center, are women still going to live there?
Are people going to live in the MS Center?
Yes.
Yes, we'll have approximately 58 apartments with people with MS that we'll make available to, which will meet the special needs housing requirement.
But not at the Phase 1 location.
No, Vinciguerra.
Yeah, there,
Then it'll be closer to the park. It'll be in the third phase. When I moved the MS Center over, I just moved the MS Center over. I did not move the MS housing over. I kept the MS housing in a building that I thought would be a little bit better for the people because it had in it a gym, physical therapy. I'm going to work with Center State of putting physical therapy downstairs and medical, and having a clubhouse for all the residents to be able to live there and work and play there.
but that's a future phase of the project. It's not this phase of Phase 1 that we're discussing this evening. This is,
You are correct. Originally, the MS Research Center and the housing were together.
Right.
Because I wanted the doctors and the scientists to see what it felt like how I lived for 20 years, to see the patients. But you know what? Moving the MS Center to this phase quicker, it's more important for me to kill MS than to worry about the doctors seeing people in the building.
And just to follow up on that, if I may, Mr. Alfieri and I had a parallel discussion regarding that housing. I think it's generally understood that housing, in terms of the broader rubric, is special needs housing for those particular folks. So one of the positive criteria under which the board originally approved that is that special needs housing through the municipalities affordable housing council. The applicant agreed to work with our affordable housing council to have whatever portion the regulations permit, have that housing be counted towards, if not the municipality's 2025 affordable housing, at least into what they call round 4.
right, and
I presume that the applicant maintains that position to work with Affordable Housing Council to qualify that housing to the extent possible.
yes, and the zoning ordinance that was adopted relatively recently has a provision in there that 58 up a minimum of 58 special needs housing units have to be provided as part of the town's affordable housing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes, Mr. Hurley.
Just for clarification, I keep hearing planning board and zoning board. Was this GDP originally granted by the planning board?
Zoning board.
By the zoning board? It's a GDP. Okay. That having been said, the only reason you're here tonight is for a parking garage. Is that correct?
Couple.
Variance for a parking garage?
From a jurisdictional point of view, but the site plan has changed, but those other uses are permitted. It's just the parking garage triggers the D variance relief. There's been a shift in some of the buildings and things of that nature, but it's virtually the same project.
Okay, but part of this application is because a parking garage is not permitted, I
Correct.
thought.
That's correct.
Now, I also understand that this new mixed-use zone allows the same type of uses which are, or at least incorporates the uses that are in the highway commercial zone, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And those uses include hospital, things such as hospitals, medical research facilities, things of that nature, correct? Which is what we're talking about here.
Correct.
The parking garage is going to be used for which facility, or what assigned for which facility?
Well, it's not limited to the research center. It's for the complex itself. So it helps the applicant meet the parking needs of the project itself, not just the research center.
Okay, my only reason for asking is because there is a provision in our ordinance that I read relative to the highway commercial zone, that a parking garage could be a permitted accessory use.
Right.
So long as it is associated with a permitted principal use. And I was thinking if it was more related to the medical research, then you really don't need a variance for it. But that's those were my questions. That's what I was a little concerned about.
Yeah, it's for the entire project. And our Ian, who'll come up next, will give a lot more detail on the connections.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Anything further from the board members? Professionals, any specific questions to Mr. Cardinality on his testimony? No? Thank you, Mr. Alfieri. Thank you, Mr. Cardinality.
Mr. Borden?
You're welcome.
Mr. Borden, you've raised your right hand almost. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, your affiliation, and the chairman will briefly voir dire you regarding your qualifications.
Certainly. Ian Borden, President of Professional Design Services, Engineering, Planning, Surveying Firm in Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm a graduate of Rutgers University, a Bachelor of Science degree in 1982. Been working in the engineering and planning field since 1983, president of PDS since 2005, and a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey.
Your credentials are acknowledged. You testified
Thank
here many times before. Mr. Borden, you're testifying as a planner tonight?
Yes,
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Borden, you have been involved in the development of this application since its inception and the presentation to the various boards. Is that correct?
yes, I have.
And your office has also prepared the plans that have been submitted in support of the application?
That is correct.
All right. We may as well start. I know you submitted a lot of exhibits that I assume you're going to want to call up at some point.
Yes,
for the
we
public.
submitted a PDF file of 4 plan exhibits. If the first one could be pulled up, please.
We'll mark that P1 also.
And can you identify that? And the board has handouts of these as well, I
I'm sorry,
believe?
A1.
Right.
Petition.
Yes, somebody handed them out.
Yes.
I think
Good.
Jeff handed us.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
And thank you for pre-marking them.
You're welcome. So Ian, just for the record, could you identify what A1 is, please?
Certainly. A1 is an aerial photograph of the project site and the surrounding area. I'm going to identify all of them over, identify them.
No, you just go.
Okay, we'll just go through. So to start with, just again, a little bit of history, a little bit of background for those members that were not present when we received our approvals. And I'll briefly summarize the site, where it is, and the approvals that we had received. The Adventure Crossing project is located along Monmouth Road, on the south side of Monmouth Road, which is in Jackson, of course. Monmouth Road being the boundary with Monmouth County, Millstone Township being to the north of us. And it's located to the west of Route 195, which shows on A1 as going from the top to the bottom right. And then you have Monmouth Road that splits the page from right to left, or basically east to west. You have Six Flags to our west, and you have 195 to our east. So we're obviously located between them. The master plans dating back more than 20 years identify these properties along Monmouth Road as not just being in the highway commercial zone, but being a destination seeking more of a creative development to support the township and the existing activities such as Six Flags. And certainly Mr. Cardinality has had the vision, unlike any others that have tried in the past, to put this together and to create something that certainly I am proud to work on and believe this town should be proud of as well. The portion of the site that is phase 1 is, maybe if you can blow that up, if you don't mind. Kind of focused on that area right there. Thank you.
Just for clarity, you see, we have a couple of uses shown. Across the street are just shown, I'm sure every member is familiar with the Burger King, McDonald's, Wawa, and the Kentucky Fried Chicken that are across the highway. That's really just to make sure we all understand where we are. Phase one is in the center of the property that I'm describing here. Phase two are the warehouses that were discussed as having received planning board approval for 2 warehouses. And the phase three that was being discussed before as well is this area to the left, known as the Vince Guerra property. That is lot 1. Phase one, again, the development is shown on it, is block 3001, lots 2, 3, and 4. As noted already, as I stated as well, this property has been in the highway commercial zone for many, many years, is now in the highway commercial mixed use zone. I'll testify more about that as I go through the timing of what happened and when. The originally we had obtained a general development plan approval for the entire property, phase 1, 2, and 3. As noted by Mr. Alfieri, the portion that is now known as phase 2, the GDP was appealed by the neighbors. The settlement arose out of that is the phase 2 conforming project with the warehouses. The zoning board, who had approved the original GDP, amended the GDP, issued an amended approval for the GDP, excluding what is now phase 2 to the east. And the GDP as approved by the board encompasses lots 1, 2, 3, and 4. So basically the GDP encompasses phases 1 and 3. In the same time frame, the phase 1 project received a couple of different major preliminary and final major site plan approvals, including D variances. The most recent and latest, the one that is currently approved, was approved on March 26, 2019 by resolution 2019-16. That project included D variances for various things, including heights of a couple of different buildings, as well as a few of the uses that at that time were not permitted. The site plan approved in 2019 was for 327,794 square feet of mixed commercial uses, the 2 hotels containing 276 rooms, convenience store with a fuel area, the 4 outdoor fields. In fact, if you don't mind, if you can go to A2, we should introduce that.
And while he's doing that, can you identify A2, please?
Yes. That's why I should have started with that. A2 is the site plan that was approved by resolution 2019-16. So I kind of ended with, we have the 4 athletic fields in the back of the property. Included with those 4 athletic fields are a concession building, a ticket building, and then a storage and maintenance building and a stage. There were 1,987 parking spaces approved for this project, where 2,187 spaces were required. A waiver was granted for that. And just as part of the project as well, as part of this phase 1, we had done an overall sign package of the project, and along the frontage of Monmouth Road, we had received approval for 12 freestanding signs. We had 2 of those that were main project signs. They were digital signs having a maximum height of 33 feet and a maximum signage area of 458 square feet. We have received approval for 8 tenant signs. Those are for the tenants, the various pad buildings that were approved up along the road. Each having a maximum height of 16 foot and a maximum signage area of 75 square feet. With one of those 8 being for the convenience store, being digital, as well as 1 sign along Route 195 having a maximum height of 150 feet and a maximum area of 600 feet. So just as, again, a little more background, understand too, when I do my testimony, I always try to do this. I don't always hit the mark and I always miss something, but I try to, when I do my direct testimony, build into it some answers to the questions that were raised in the various review letters that we appreciated receiving. Phase one also includes some off-site road improvements to Monmouth Road. They include adding, if you could.
Before you, when you, it includes means the prior approval, this application, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Obviously, as part of any project, we have to receive outside agency approval. And always, the county planning board is obviously a key outside agency. In this case, we are up fronted on Monmouth Road, which is a county roadway. Because it is the boundary between Ocean and Monmouth County, there is an agreement between the counties where Monmouth County assumes the engineering responsibility for the road. So the necessity to do improvements and the nature and review of those improvements in this case falls to the jurisdiction of the Monmouth County Planning Board. We still obtain approval, and we have approval from the Ocean County Planning Board, but the actual engineering review of those roadway improvements is done by the Monmouth County Engineer's Office. And we have obtained approval, full approval from the Monmouth County Engineer without condition to construct improvements, which will be starting very soon. And those include, if you don't mind zooming in a bit on the top of the page, this area right here. Currently at the Pine Drive intersection, there's a small, for the eastbound traffic, to make a left turn to Pine Drive to go to the Millstone Township. If you move it down just a little bit, I appreciate it. There is a small jug handle to make that left turn. One of the improvements we're making is we need to add a fourth leg to this. That's a signalized intersection, of course, with Pine Drive. We're adding a fourth leg to the intersection, including a new traffic signals. We're eliminating the existing small near side jug handle and building a much larger one through the property. In addition, any traffic coming off of 195 heading westbound is not able to make a left turn at Pine Drive. So that traffic goes to, there's an existing reversing jug handle. If you don't mind going back to A1. Again, this is phase one here. This is Pine Drive. This is what we call the reversing jug handle. That's in front of phase three, of course. But that's the way that any westbound traffic would make do the jug handle to make a left turn and come back to the site, back to phase one or phase two. And we received approval to expand that jug handle to accept the increased traffic that this project is generating. So those improvements are fully approved by Monmouth County. Work will be starting very soon, and completion of those improvements is required before any COs for this project can be issued. Subsequent to our approval in 2019, there was the new overlay zone that's been discussed lightly already. In February of 2020, the Township Committee adopted the Highway Commercial Mixed Use Zone, the HCMU zone, under section 244-57.2. The overlay zone expanded the list of permitted uses. It limited the use of these requirements to a larger tract, not just any property, because the intent is, again, that these would be for more of a destination type of a project. All of the uses and heights of the buildings that were previously approved by variance with the 2019 subdivision and prior GDP are now permitted by the ordinance. And as Mr. Alfieri noted, the reason we're here tonight is the opinion was given to us that the parking garage structure is not specifically listed as a permitted or conditional use in the HCMU zone and requires a D variance. If you don't mind, if you can go to A3, the third sheet.
And would you identify A3, please?
Certainly. Yeah, that's perfect, thank you. H3 is the overall site plan included in a set of plans provided to the board for tonight's hearing. It is sheet number 3 of 52, having a date of January 11th, 2019, with a revision date of March 22nd, 2021. So this is the subdivision or site plan, I'm sorry, for which we are seeking an amended site plan approval. And I'll briefly describe the various things that were changed on the project. A change in the plans, but not on paper, is we've created some subphases on the project. The purpose of these is to time the construction, and primarily the primary reason is for building permitting. Because we have, and they're noted on the plans, this area on what I would call on the inside of the jug handle is phase A. The rear area, the air dome, and the fields, hotels, convention center, and MS Research Center are all phase B. And then we have pad buildings on the east side of the Pine Drive entrance, which is phase C. The primary reason for this phasing is to accommodate phase A because we have 3 national tenants in these 3 pads that were noted by Mr. Cardinality. You have a 7-Eleven proposed as the convenience store, a Popeyes, and Taco Bell. These 3 pads are not changed by this amended approval, and we're seeking to get those building permits issued now. So we're seeking that as a way to not delay the issuance of the building permits as we work through some technical items as maybe addressing the board comments on the subsequent phases. Secondly, now we get into the actual things that we changed. In the original plan on phase A, this one building here, we had 2 separate fast food buildings that was incorporated into a single building. That single building does have a drive-through. It's not intended as a fast food per se, but as I believe Mr. Cardinale referenced, Starbucks. Trying to do it in sequence of phasing. The original approval had separate trash enclosures for each of these pads. In consultation with Waste Management, we've eliminated those in lieu of a larger compactor pad, which is located centrally between all the buildings. That compactor pad will have separate compactors for refuse and recyclables, and will more efficiently service these pads, these 4 pad buildings, with obviously, taking 4 and making 1. So that's less impact. As part of this, and as part of the jug handle, as we work through the geometry of the jug handle with the Monmouth County Engineering Department, this is Stormwater Basin 1 up in the top left here. That basin became significantly larger. The original approval had this, what I'm pointing to was the original and indoor recreation building, and that is where we have moved the convention center. The convention center in the original GDP was located closer to Anderson Road, but as noted as part of that appeal, we were not allowed to have it there based upon the appeal by the residents. So we have replaced the indoor recreation with a convention center. As part of that, this is the Hilton Hotel that I'm pointing to that remains in the same location as the approval. The Marriott Hotel was originally located at the corner of our main internal access or intersection, and we've relocated it to the front of the convention center. a big part of, as you can see, a big part of what happens, and people I see question, not this board certainly, and not your professionals, why are things changing all the time? Don't we know what we're doing? Don't we? And that's because we're listening to the marketplace, and it's an evolving thing. And in this case, the hotel is such a complementary use to the convention that to connect it to the convention certainly is a natural fit. We've, of course, discussed the medical research building. There's an 81,000 square foot, 4-story medical research, which has been moved from phase 3, the GDP, to this location behind the Air Dome. The Air Dome remains unchanged from the original approval, but the medical research, and then adjacent to it is the proposed parking garage. As noted, the parking garage is not for the medical research. The parking garage is to meet the parking demand of the entire project. Most specifically, it's driven by the convention center.
Through the chair, can you just clarify where that parking deck, is it going to be underneath the medical center?
It's going to be next to the medical center.
So where would we see that on the plan?
If you enlarge that area right there, it's hard to see on an aerial. It's even, I'm looking at my 11 by 17 exhibit, it's hard to see. But you'll see, it's easier on the large scale site plans, but there's a line right here. So the medical research is say the right or easternmost, I would say quarter of it. And then the parking garage is the left 3/4. Those two structures are not connected. Although they look like a common line, they'll be separated by a very, very small space. Because the medical research cannot be attached to the parking garage for reasons of vibration and disturbance, being a research facility. But this is the park. So the parking garage is a above ground parking garage.
Will it also be 4 stories?
It will be at least 5, possibly 6, but it will not be higher than the 4-story medical research. Understanding that the floors in a medical research building are much higher than the floors of a garage. So
Just to follow up on Mr. Costanza's point, will we see any architecturals on that, Mr. Gordon?
we do not have them currently. Those are being developed. As you can imagine, the medical research is a very very different item, and that is being worked on. We would provide them as a condition of any approval.
I'm sorry, a clarification of the park. How many parking spaces are you proposing in the parking deck? Is that known at this time?
It's 1,100.
1,100?
And I believe I said, if I didn't, I want to make sure, it's very important. The parking garage, we have tied the parking garage to the construction of the convention center. All the that's when it, and Mr. Ray is going to provide traffic and parking testimony, but that is the trigger to the parking garage. The parking garage must be completed before a CO can be issued for the convention center.
Is the housing in that medical research also? I apologize.
No, there's no housing there.
There's no housing proposed in phase 1 whatsoever. And then if you don't mind sliding the plan back to the top a tiny bit, up to phase C here, getting near the list of changes we made, we have, there was 2 separate restaurant buildings here. And what we've done is we've consolidated them into what we call Building 12, which is 24,000 square feet. And as denoted in the parking calculations, we have assessed it as the parking calculations as 16,000 square feet of retail office with 8,000 square feet of restaurant. And that's what our parking calculation is based on.
Through the chair again, I'm sorry. If I could, just go back to phase A. You're combining that one building, the westernmost building. It was 2 originally, it's now going to be 1.
Correct.
Is it going to have the same amount of square footage? Or
It increases. Actually, I should have maybe done this first. The amended site plan proposes 429,179 square feet.
I'm sorry, that number again?
429, 179. So that's nearly 100,000 square feet more square footage. Most of that is in the medical research, with some of it being up in the front pads and just, I couldn't around. There has been no change in the hotels. They continue to have 276 rooms. The convenience store with the fuel area, 4 outdoor fields with their various accessory buildings. The stage and the outdoor athletic accessory buildings, the concession, ticketing, storage and maintenance are all accessory, as well as the stage, are all accessory buildings to the athletic fields, which by themselves are accessory to the main recreation, which is inside the air dome.
Through the chairman, may I ask a question, so I don't lose it? That increase of plus or minus $100,000 square feet, is that what from a 30,000 foot question, is that what necessitates this slightly larger stormwater management basin?
No, what we did is detailing the stormwater management. We had, for example, in this area, we had an underground recharge system. So making the basin larger allowed us to eliminate that and some of the other underground recharge systems. So we always had the volume, we're just providing it in a more cost-efficient way. To just wrap up the changes, I'm sorry to jump out of order there.
I did it to you.
We have one of the freestanding signs, the one at this location. Recall that there were 2 main project signs along the frontage that were already granted variances to a height of 33 feet with a sign area of 458 square feet. We are asking for that single main project sign, frankly, the most important project sign, because it's close to Pine Drive, to be increased in height from 33 feet to 45 feet. So a C2 variance is required for that.
I'm sorry,
33 feet
I'm sorry, from 33
to 45.
Thank you.
And the reason for that is that once we completed our traffic signal design and did our stuff that I can talk about, but I'm not an expert in, clearance, the height of the lights, height of the wires, and then we had the sign company go out there and actually erect, with a truck where the sign would be. It wouldn't be visible at that height. So that was driven by the events with designing the traffic signal. And we also added, I know it was noted in the planner's report, we also added some internal signage. This is the main spine road that serves the athletic fields and the convention center. We added some internal signs to identify the different buildings. Those internal signs, in my opinion, are not regulated by the sign ordinance because they're not on a public road. Then it's within the project.
Through the chair, I'm sorry to interrupt again. Since you brought up signage, internal signage, do you intend to have any type of, how can I put it, pedestrian stoplights, illuminated lights for, since it's a main vein road coming in, is there any proposal for pedestrian cross traffic, crosswalks, traffic light signals, anything of that nature?
Well, that's next on my list, funny enough.
Thank you.
You
I'm
read
sorry.
my mind. One of the changes we've made is this internal main intersection from the jug handle to the Pine Drive extension will be signalized. That will have a traffic signal installed, including crosswalks and push buttons for the crosswalks for pedestrian. That traffic signal will be required based upon the traffic work that Mr. Ray's done. Again, similar to the parking garage prior to CO of the convention center. It is also a condition of the planning board approval for the warehouse that we have that signal operational before the CO of any phase 2 warehouse. So there's 2 triggers, one at the planning board for the warehouse, and we propose another trigger from the zoning board for the convention center.
Yeah, and at the planning board level, they required crosswalks, et cetera, so because that's a highly trafficked area. So we had agreed as a condition to that approval, and we agree, and I know it's in your professional review letters, to work on crosswalks and signage and things of that nature. We obviously would work with them to make sure that everyone's satisfied with it.
Right. As far as pedestrian access, it was obviously critically important, even going back to the original GDP approval, the original phase 1 approval. And we're constantly seeking to refine that because pedestrian access between these uses is critically important, given the recreational use and the fact that these uses all work together, the hotels with the convention, with the air dome, with the fields. So we have walkways that extend down the main spine, crosswalks down. If you were to scan up, if you don't mind, just kind of pull the plan up. Yep, keep going. We have crosswalks in this area here, so that the fields can walk between the hotels, the air dome, and so we have pedestrian access has been a very important part of the design, as well as handicap parking throughout the site at each of the proposed uses.
If I may,
Yeah,
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Stanton.
one last through the chair. So this main road here will also feed the two proposed warehouses that are forthcoming in the other phase?
No.
No.
All of the, if you don't mind, go back down. I'm going back and forth on you. Very important part of the design is that all the warehouse traffic utilizes this road right here, the extension of the jug handle. There is no truck traffic other than what is needed to service the convention, not even the convention, but what is needed to service these uses is permitted down the extension of Pine Drive.
And that was a condition of the planning board approval for the warehouses.
Mr. Peters?
Mr. Borden, just clarify one thing on the sign before we lose our place marker. The Pine Drive sign, you're increasing in height. Was that originally approved in that location?
It was approved. No, it was not. If you don't mind.
Is it a changeable text sign?
Yes.
You need to make sure it's more than 200 feet from the signal, don't you?
Well, it was approved right at the signal on the east side, and we've moved it.
Was it a changeable text sign?
Understand, yes, but we've moved it to the west, farther away from the
I want
signal.
to make sure you get the relief you
Yes.
need
I
to build
didn't-
what
I'm
you're
not aware.
asking for. And if a variance is necessary, let's get it tonight. Deal with it, because I'm not sure. I can't find from the previous approval or from what was submitted this information. So let's be
Yeah,
specific at what the Pine
No, I
Drive
appreciate
sign
that,
is.
I understand that, Mr. Peters. We had provided, there's a detail on the plan of the sign. It is changeable copy sign. If a requirement exists of minimum setback of 200 feet to a traffic signal, we would certainly ask for variance relief from that. We've moved it farther from the signal on the opposite side, but it will be located within 200 feet.
Mr. Borden, Mr. Alfieri, if I may. I've got to admit, Mr. Borden, right now, my mind is spinning, trying to follow that.
There's a lot of stuff.
It's impossible to make sense and maintain a memory of what you're proposing in terms of the circulation patterns in here. I know that Mr. Miskovich in his report has made many notes and questions on that. Are his concerns going to be addressed in your testimony or by somebody else's in terms of how all of that internal circulation is going to work from building to building, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, the answer is yes. What we, and we certainly don't disagree with any of Mr. Miskovich's comments, and we agree to comply with all of those. It was not our intent to go through the circulation around every single building other than to agree with his comments and agree to address them.
Well, then maybe Mr. Alfieri or Mr. Gertner can correct me. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the scope of the application and tonight. If it's really just for the purpose of determining whether or not a variance should be granted for the parking garage, and I think for the sign, I think that was the other one. I'm just trying to fit the puzzle pieces together in terms of, is the circulation pattern, does that become an issue in terms
Well,
of?
so I'm going to jump
Go
in.
ahead.
In my opinion, as well as at least all three of our professionals, it is, because by proposing, absent the issue of a variance required for the parking garage, by proposing the garage at its location and by articulating that at least one of its purposes is to serve what is across the street, the Convention Expo Center, potentially the hotel, potentially as well, the Air Dome. a site, a pedestrian with, you know, the argument that there's going to be families and kids and stuff around, I think a pedestrian circulation plan or articulating what that plan is and what it looks like and how internally the applicant intends folks to get around the site, I think is very important. Site lighting, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not just a dawn to dusk functioning. They're gonna, you know, some of those fields, if you remember from the first applications here, some of those fields are gonna be lit into the night, so you're gonna have people walking up from the fields back to that parking. That's a long-winded way to say yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Sean and with respect that if you remember, this board previously granted preliminary and final site plan approval for what the project used to look like. All right. They have since modified it. And during the initial hearings, a lot of that testimony was provided to support what you approved. So I think what the applicant should do tonight is at least focus in the changes that you made. How did they change the pedestrian circulation? Where you previously proposed parking at the ground surface, you're now proposing a parking garage. So you're intensifying the parking in one area of the site. How does that impact the adjacent uses and so on? So I think you just go into a little bit more detail of the changes that you made. How do they impact your prior approvals and what the board previously granted?
Thank you, John.
And that Mr. Ray might be able to do a better job because he's going to talk globally about all the traffic issues, but Ian can touch on where, to the extent he can.
Certainly. Certainly one of the comments that Mr. Miskovich raised was identifying more clearly and possibly and probably adding more walkways and crosswalks between the parking garage, particularly in the air dome to the north of it and the convention center across the main access drive from it. As I noted, just off the bottom of the plane here, we do have a main crosswalk at this intersection here. But I can see where we have gaps where we need to, I understand the nature of Mr. Miskovich's comments, and we would provide those linkages that he requested to make sure that we are linking those uses. I think the framework is here. A few details need to be added, but I think it's. Otherwise, as the project goes, the circulation, including the pedestrian, hasn't changed. The linkage of the hotels, as I noted before, the hotels, the crosswalks at the signalized intersection of the main internal intersection remain the same as the original approval. Lastly, before I get into some new things, originally, speaking again about the changes that were made to the plans, the original approval included some waivers that were granted for curb and pavement for some of the parking areas for the recreational uses. We had received a waiver to build some of the parking with stone with no curbing. This current plan, as proposed, eliminates the stone parking and has all paved parking with curb. So we've actually eliminated those waivers. And then if you don't mind, going to Exhibit A4.
Would you identify that while he's scrolling?
Certainly. Exhibit A4 is what we call Site Plan B. It is Phase C. It is sheet 5 of 52. And these are two changes, which I apologize, that were not included in the March 23rd submittal. But similar to the trash enclosure consolidation discussion and changes we made in Phase A, we have taken, we're proposing to eliminate the 3 separate trash enclosures for these 3 buildings and create, where I'm pointing, a compactor for to service all 3 buildings. We are also adding a drive-through along the east side of Building 12, which is a 24,000 square foot building. There's a tenant that has come up since our submittal that would like to have that. And then that necessitated, we had showed larger striped spaces in this area for buses or trucks. I know that was questions in Mr. Miskovich's review. Those were intended for buses that might be at the athletic fields or even the convention. So that was the intent. What we've done is and there was some circulation questions about those. We've turned them into these parallel parking, which are much easier to access from the extension of the jug handle and then circling back out to the signalized intersection. So these are just some circulation changes, as well as the consolidation of the refuse enclosures that we would ask the board to consider as part of these changes. Just continuing on with I had testified to the square footage that we're proposing with the amended phase one. I'd also testified to the parking that we had provided in the approved phase one. Now we talk about the parking for the amended phase one. We are proposing 2,470 parking spaces, where the plans denote the requirement for 2,757. We do require a design waiver for the number of parking spaces. The board professionals, however, have questioned the parking calculation as it relates to the ordinance. It questions particularly two of the uses, the medical research center. We had allocated 150 spaces for the medical research based upon the number of employees. It was noted there is a parking requirement for a similar use, which would require 164 spaces. So that is an additional 14 spaces allocated to the medical research beyond what our plan shows. And lastly, the convention center, we had allocated one space per 100 square feet. It was noted that the ordinance does have a standard of 1 for 50, which would require additional spaces. So when you add all that together, the actual ordinance requirement is 3,900 spaces. Mr. Ray will provide testimony substantiating the parking provided. So the waiver was required for the number of spaces. To talk about the intensity of the building of phase one, we have building, let me go back. The HCMU zone contains, as I mentioned earlier, contains basically two different zoning standards. They have what they call tract requirements, which is the applicability of the HCMU zone to apply to a particular project or property. And those requirements are a tract area of 70 acres, a tract width and frontage of 2,900 feet, a tract depth of 1,000 feet, and the total project as it stands now, which is phases 1 and 2 combined, complies with these requirements since the area is 162.7 acres. The tract width and frontage is over 4,000 feet, and the tract depth is nearly 3,000 feet. So clearly, and that's only phases 1 and 2. Obviously, once we add phase 3, it gets substantially larger, but it certainly complies with those tract requirements. The building and impervious coverage under the zoning is permitted to be 30% for building coverage and 75% for impervious coverage. The total for phase 1 and 2 was 22% building and 45% impervious. There was a statement in the planner's report questioning the conservation overlay zone standards in the ordinance, which is 244-45C1C, where that ordinance requires that wetlands be deducted from any building or impervious coverage calculation. The ordinance did contain an economic exclusion for commercial uses, but that expired in 2015 and to my knowledge has not been extended. So to apply those standards results in a building coverage of 27% and an impervious coverage of 55%.
Both are under the maximum.
Correct. Both are obviously continue to comply. So the building and impervious coverage requirements comply under any form of the calculation. The application does include a minor subdivision as a separate application. My testimony is addressing both. The minor subdivision is a technical subdivision, and that is driven by the jug handle. If you don't mind, blowing back out, reducing the scale of this. I'm sorry, A3. Perfect, thank you. As I had testified earlier, the new jug handle would be extended from Monmouth Road. That new jug handle will be a public right-of-way dedicated to Jackson Township. That is a condition of the vacation of the existing small substandard jug handle by the NJDOT. They required that the replacement for that jug handle be a public road. So there is a resolution adopted by the Township Committee in 2016 or 2019 that accepts the right-of-way for this jug handle to the Pine Drive extension with the requirement that the project owner perform the necessary maintenance on that road. So because of that, we need to create a new lot number for the Phase A because it's now separated from the rest of the project, Phase B and C, from a public road. So that is the purpose of the minor subdivision. The HCMU zone permits a technical subdivision and specifically allows it to be done irrespective of zone requirements, understanding that it is a technical subdivision and not tied to the design of a project, and consistent with the requirements in the ordinance. When I described the bulk zone requirements of the project and how we've described them on the plans as far as setbacks and building heights as they relate to the setbacks are all done from the original tract, irrespective of the subdivision.
Can I ask a legal, through the chair, legal question, Mr. Alfieri? Not taking any exception to the testimony, how do we maintain connection of that separate lot to the balance of the application?
Well, I'm not sure what
Either through-
connection.
Well, for instance, you don't want that lot sold out separately, just because now it's a minor subdivision, technical or not.
Well, I'm not sure why it couldn't be in the future.
Well, maybe it could, maybe it couldn't, but if part of the testimony is this interconnection and it's a technical subdivision, I may be overthinking it too.
Yeah, the ordinance, the technical subdivision section of the ordinance contemplates, it's there so that a developer can either carve out lots for financing or sale purposes. That's why the technical subdivision provision was included in the ordinance, and it is in many of these larger commercial tracts, so that you don't have to come in and deal with the bulk standards if you're creating separate lots, because you'll have cross-access and parking easements that connect everything. That's how it would be done.
Okay,
So in this case, that would happen, although the way this would work, assuming that Phase A is not further subdivided or carved up, you really don't need a cross-access easement because that's one tract and the parking and everything services it. And they would have to cross a public street to get access. But we have no issue if the board wants to impose a condition that we have a cross-access easement and parking easement for the entire tract so that everyone can use each other's parking. We have no issue with that.
Maybe that's the way to handle it. I just raised, and I raised the question only because part of the testimony, at least as I understood it, was that the municipality accepted the new jug handle subject to the developer maintaining it still. So if it's subdivided, who's the developer or which developer is going to maintain that jug handle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think
I got one.
from the planning board point of view, I'm not sure it's as relevant, but from a developer's agreement point of view with the township, we're going to have to deal with that.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I
We're going to have to
understood.
tie that responsibility to something finite so that it can't be
Okay,
passed off.
appreciate that. Like I said, I didn't take any exception to the planner's testimony. It was a technical question, so now.
If you don't mind enlarging in this part of the property right here. And blowing up, expanding to see this part of the site better,
All right, but
if you don't mind.
Mr. Alfieri, just again, this is also part of, I'll bring this to the fore, conversation that we had. Mr. Hill asked me, I think it's a good time just to mention it, that you, the applicant, has no objection to the continuance of proposing and ultimately entering into a full developers agreement with the municipality.
That's no problem. It's in all the resolutions
any
and
event.
we have no issue with it. And we're going to have to, obviously, there's going to be a lot of paperwork that has to be done to perfect these approvals ultimately.
Thank you.
I just want to, before I get into some of this planning testimony, finish kind of the general description of the project with a brief discussion on the rear of the convention center and this is the Hilton Hotel. And that is the areas for the loading of both of those is a paved area along the rear, and it is paved, which exists on an easement, which is on the phase 2 portion of the site. And it is closed off in the area by the main, recall that I had testified that there's no truck traffic in this area. And the way that we prevent any truck traffic from the loading and general activities of the convention and hotel from accessing in that road is that there is no loading zone that extends to this road. The only thing that's here is a small area of grasscrete, which would, in other words, allow emergency vehicles to enter that way, but would not allow a daily movement of trucks to access that area.
Right, so and this was also discussed at the planning board level, trucks that need to provide product or et cetera to the hotel and the convention center will take the same truck route that the warehouse takes. There will be an easement on the warehouse property that allows those trucks to get to the back of those buildings and then exit. And in the application, all of these lots were named. On the public notice, all of these lots were named. We notified everyone within 200 feet of lots 5, 6, 19, and 20, which are the Anderson Road lots, just so because it is part of this application.
And there was a question raised in the planning review. We are proposing landscaping along the edge of the easement, extending down along the fields as well, between phase 1 and the warehouse uses. And that is an area of bamboo. We're fully aware that while bamboo is a very effective screen, it is an invasive plant. So that will be planted in a trench, excavated trench that has impermeable liners installed. And that will provide a very narrow, yet it's anticipated to be between 20 and 30 feet high and be an effective screen between these uses and the warehouse use to the west. Or to the east, I'm sorry. Otherwise, I have my planning testimony, which would start with the, actually, I skipped over one of the, starting my planning testimony, I realized that I had skipped over one of the items we had added to the project, and that is, as part of the energy efficiency and compliance with a energy master plan, with Mr. Spano will address after me, we have added ground-mounted solar to many of the parking. I'm pointing to A3 here. This is just an example. You'll see them on your exhibit as shaded areas. So those are ground-mounted solar panels, carports, as we call them. So the cars would park underneath the solar panels. The solar energy is a conditional use under the highway commercial zone under 244-57C13. In addition, there's a separate ordinance requirement for solar energy facilities, 244-133.1. So I apologize for boring you to tears, but I have to go through these items item by item. These are all listed on the plans as well on the on this exhibit A3, which is again sheet 3 in your set. They're listed. Under 24457 C13, we have A through I. I'll go through them very quickly. It states that the solar collectors and accessory
Ian,
equipment.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but rather than go point by point, do we meet all of the conditions?
Yes.
So we don't need variance
No.
relief for solar, right?
that
Unless
good
the
enough?
board wants us to go through ordinance by section, I think we would obviously stipulate that we would meet all the conditional use standards for the solar. And if you want to hear more about it, we could certainly do it. And our next witness is a alternate energy developer. We figured we'll break up all the technical so your minds can relax for a little while. And we're going to have a brief testimony who will describe how this whole energy project will work to meet the future plans of the country, actually, as far as energy efficiency. It's a very unique plan. But so we're meeting all the conditional use standards, right, Ian?
That is correct.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. Move to the next one.
And that is, I'm sorry, that is listed on Exhibit A3, which is also in your plan set as sheet 3 of the site plan set. So you can just read that for yourself then, but we do comply with all of them.
So you're going to go to your planning?
Yes. So as we've discussed, the D variance that we require is as the parking garage as an accessory use, which is a D1 variance. In my opinion, the parking garage meets the positive criteria through A, encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use of development in a manner that will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Under F, to provide sufficient space for appropriate locations for a variety of uses according to the respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey residents. Under I, to promote the desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangements. And K, to encourage planned unit development which incorporate the best features of design and encourage the type, design, and layout of residential, commercial, industrial, or recreational development. The special reasons to justify granting the variance for the parking garage obviously must show that the use promotes the general welfare. In other words, that the site is particularly suitable. The general welfare is served because the site is suitable under the Larry Price versus Himeji LLC and the Union City Zoning Board case decided on June 25 of 2013. The property is suitable as a large-scale destination mixed commercial development. Obviously, parking is a permitted use in the highway commercial and HCMU zone, and while not particularly listing a parking structure as a use, certainly we believe meeting the intent of the zone plan. The parking garage is purposely situated behind the air dome, which has a height higher than the parking garage. So the parking garage would not be visible from Monmouth Road. It meets the height requirements, as does the medical center, and frankly, as does the air dome. The air dome had required a D6 height variance when we originally appeared before the board, but under the new HCMU zone standards, no longer requires that variance relief. But in any event, it is taller than the parking garage. The parking garage is an area less than 2% of the land area of the project devoted to that project. And the fact that it's part of a project with direct access to Monmouth Road, adjacent to the Six Flags theme park, serving this destination use, and encouraged by the 2009 master plan, as I had testified, which master plan encouraged flexibility of uses within the area of Monmouth Road between the Six Flags Park and 195 to effectuate the master plan objectives of commercial development. Lastly, we have some C variances that were discussed. We have the sign height that I testified for the freestanding sign to extend the height from the previously approved 33 feet. where 16 feet is required maximum, and to extend it to 45 feet. We did relocate that sign from the east side of Pine Drive to the west side. We also request a variance for the offset to the being less than 200 feet from the traffic signal. And lastly, it was noted in the planner's review that our storage building for the athletic field, which is the very bottom of the athletic fields, if you don't mind scrolling this plan up the other way, I'm sorry. Down. I'm boring myself. I don't know what's up or down. We have this about athletic fields again, phase 2 being to the right. We have a very small storage building, less than 2,000 square feet in this area, which is within, which is on the property line. Recall that there's that access easement along phase 2. So that places the storage building on the property line where we don't meet the setback requirement. So we do request the side yard setback for that single building for a setback of less than, of 0.
And that's set back to the warehouse property, not to any other use?
That's correct. Yes, it's an internal property line to the project. And then under the design waivers, where of course the standard of proof is lower and is one of impracticality versus hardship or suitability, we have the parking waiver that I had mentioned, where, let me get the exact numbers, where 2,470 parking spaces are proposed, where 3,900 are required per the ordinance, and Mr. Ray will provide testimony substantiating the parking and the sharing of parking between the uses. That basically wraps me up.
That's all we have of Mr. Borden. I know that's a lot of information to take in. We apologize, but it's a complicated project and
Through the chair,
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Costanzo.
if I may. A question, my concerns about the parking garage. The plans you presented to us are kind of, they're lacking in specificity, is that a word? Of its design and how it sits. I mean, we previously had architectural drawings of it or other buildings. And, you know, you yourself even admitted that the renderings presented to the board this evening, it was difficult to separate the medical center from, even see the separation.
But there are no renderings. It's two-dimensional.
Correct. That itself is troubling. I would have liked to have seen more detail with regards to the parking garage. And I have other concerns, but I think that it wouldn't address, I won't address them at this time. I'll open the rest of the board for any comments.
Any of the board members, questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hurley, yes.
This may have been addressed, I may have missed it, so forgive me. On the minor subdivision that you're creating because of the division between, what was it, A and C, phases A and?
Yes,
phases
yes.
Does that create any C variances as a result? Any setback variances, anything of that nature?
No, because under the HCMU zone includes a section under the ordinance entitled technical subdivision. And the ordinance specifically states that understanding that larger commercial jobs often require, for various ownership reasons of different pad buildings or uses, the potential to create different lots, that any subdivision of a project that is in that meets the requirements of the HCMU zone is not required to follow the bulk zone requirements.
So, Mr. Hurley, if I may, just, and this really ends up through the chairman going to Mr. Peters. Mr. Peters, I believe, addresses that question on page 6.VA of his report. So, Mr. Chairman, for fear of stepping on your toes and Mr. Hurley's, Mr. Peters, is that a your understanding satisfactory?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
If the board members don't understand what the technical subdivision requirements are, either the applicant or myself can go through the technical subdivision requirements and indicate how they're being met. So Ian's might have been the quicker view of it, but the ordinance is specific as to what things the applicant needs to take into account when placing lines for the technical subdivision. To the extent that we have had an opportunity to review that, both with the applicant and through the plans to date, we find that it meets the intent of the technical subdivision ordinance. Otherwise, it would have said it needs a bunch of variances outside of that section. But it was considered for large retail commercial tracts such as this, the technical subdivisions are necessary. And the one that always came to mind to me as someone who drives up and down Route 9 or county roads is a larger strip mall that's got a bank and a McDonald's up front. So whatever that highway commercial zone was, we said you need 4 or 5 acres. Well, the pad site for the bank and the pad site for McDonald's doesn't need 4 or 5 acres. The subdivision, the big site plan for the grocery store needed that. So think of the one over on County Line Road where we have the ShopRite. The technical subdivision would allow McDonald's to own the McDonald's pad site, the bank to own the bank pad site, and the developer to own the strip mall that includes the grocery store, the liquor store, the whatever else is in there. So that was the nexus for the technical subdivision ordinance that you see here in this zone that would be applicable to this site.
So my simple answer is if you're okay with it, so am I.
Well, thank you.
And just without overkilling it, and Mr. Gertner was 100% on point when he pointed out that one of the conditions in that section is to make sure you have cross-access parking, drainage, because the drainage for this also services other portions, so we will have that easement document in place.
Any other questions from the boards, from Mr. Borden? None? Mr. Peters, I do have a question for you to assist us in the rationale for the variance for the parking garage. We've heard Mr. Borden's analysis and his evaluation. Can you comment on it? Is there anything that we're missing in terms of that parking garage within this entire commercial endeavor that we should be considering?
The only guidance I might offer has to do with the efficiency of multi-level parking. We often see them in urban areas, and they're utilized for 2 reasons. 1, the limited space, and 2, the ability to produce more parking in a limited space. Here, if the applicant wanted to put more elbow room between things, he could put more ground parking. He puts more ground parking, he's going to put more impervious surface down. He's going to have to disturb more of the site. And even if we took the most restrictive definition of impervious coverage or building coverage, they're still only at 2/3 of it, Ian? You were at 50% where 70 is permitted? So certainly they could go and place more asphalt and give us another sea of asphalt, the parking area out in front of the ShopRite, so to speak. In this particular case, in order to make this a walkable type community, the parking garage offers a number of easy things where you have high intensity uses, such as a convention center, that sports dome, or even the hotels. It makes the walking distance shorter for each of the pedestrians that's in that area. So it's easier to direct people when you tell them you got to come down this, there's 4 corners to a parking garage. You come out this corner, you head that way. You come out this corner, you go that way. So instead of there being just 1 parking garage, 1 parking lot there, there's 5 or 6. So quite frankly, from a planning perspective, it's an efficiency of land use.
And just to add further, can't help myself, as I would perceive that Mr. Ray is going to relate sort of some of the arguments that Mr. Peters just laid out. Mr. Ray's going to connect that to the parking waiver request itself, the interconnection, what Mr. Cardinal talked about with the cross easement with Great Adventure, the ability for overflow parking there because they're going to have the setup, between even Great Adventure and back and forth, so that the overall workings and interconnections of the totality of the site, based on what Mr. Cardinal said as well, will in all likelihood come from Mr. Ray to support that, what looks on a raw number perspective, a fairly large request of a parking waiver. I put the pressure on Mr. Ray. I teed him up, though.
I have a
Thank you.
question.
Yes,
for-
Ms.
Actually, for Mr. Peters. So if they move those, the solar panels, is there a reason they couldn't go on top of a building and then there would be more room for parking and just give more space in general? Like,
It's my understanding that the parking areas that have solar on top of them don't limit the ability to park cars under them.
Yeah, they're above the cars. You park under the solar panels.
So I'm trying to think off the top of my head, a local place that has,
Yeah, I saw them at
I
Woodbridge
think you
Center.
should go out
the other day.
195 towards 130.
Rutgers has them. Center State has them.
Stockton University has them, and that's far, but
so you're not going to see these solar panels that are on the plan?
you will see them, but they're above the cars.
Cars can park underneath them. They're like
Okay.
8 or 9 foot high.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and
that's what I'm
testing
saying.
it.
So the easiest way to explain it would be it's similar to a canopy at a gas
I
station
understand.
with the panels up top. That's all.
That's a great
just-
explanation. Thanks, Evan.
Not showing up depicted on the, yeah.
Anything further from Mr. Borden? Nothing further? Go ahead, Mr.
I have a concern in regards to the circulation. I don't know, was that presented in regards to individuals walking, children and their families walking around the facility? Did you present that to the planning board? Did we? I'm sorry.
Yes, we did.
And do you have it for us?
Well, I just point to the site plans. We show all the walkways on the site plans. I noted that Mr. Miskovich's letter in particular denoted that we were missing a few connections between the parking garage and the air dome and the convention center, which we are going to provide. But otherwise, I believe, as I had testified, we have full walkways shown on the plans at the main signalized intersection, walkways running along the new jug handle tying into each of these pads, as well as walkway into the Phase C, as well as a walkway extending down the main access drive to the ball fields, which connect the two hotels and the convention. The Hilton Hotel is physically, both hotels are physically connected to the convention internally within the buildings. But yet there's a walkway that connects on the outside, each hotel to this main spine of sidewalk, which has a main crosswalk at this location, which then has further connections through crosswalks to the athletic field right in this location. And as I noted, and a walkway, of course, not of course, from the air dome to the main crosswalks at the intersection. And the small missing portions that Mr. Miskovich pointed out in these areas above and below the parking garage, which we'll add. But I believe the site plan shows an extensive walkway system that connects all of the uses in a safe manner.
And the walkways you're talking about that run parallel to the spine road, those are sidewalks?
These are 5 foot sidewalks. Normal sidewalk is 4 foot. We made these a foot wider at 5 feet.
My concern is basically for these people that are going to be walking around the facility, safety.
Of course.
Safety is the issue.
Oh, that's been a critical part of our design since the beginning in 2016 when I started work on this project.
And Mr. Ray will discuss that a little more detail when he comes up.
Mr. Miskovich?
I just want to reiterate, as Ian pointed out, the main walkways are along the main, I'm going to call Pine Drive. I think that's easier. And connecting on the main roads. What seems to have happened when they put in the parking garage, and as Mr. Costanza pointed out, it's not really delineated pedestrian access from the garage either to the rec center or to the convention center. There is a sidewalk crossing in the southern part that kind of connects to the ball fields, but there's nothing saying how someone here could walk out to get to here. So that needs to be defined, and I think that could be worked out, but the infrastructure is along the main roadways and interconnections.
Thank
So, and as Ernie pointed out, I just want to reiterate, the garage centrally locates some of that parking so that if I'm in here, I have easier access to the different uses on the property without having a large surface lot where you got to walk a half mile to get to a particular site. The only question I have for Ian, and it was in my comment, we're talking about pedestrians, is traffic circulation, and talked about wayfinding signs, because you mentioned signs earlier in your testimony.
Yes.
We talked about having some kind of signage that if I'm coming in from 537, how do I get to the parking garage? How am I directed to the ball fields or the convention center? So there's some kind of interior signing and directory signing that needs to be developed that I believe is not part of the package right now.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, and what Ian indicated is we would agree to work with you to come up with a internal circulation signage plan. And wherever you want to supplement pedestrian safety issues, that's not an issue.
Right. The thing that we pointed out that we'll have to flush out further is if I have a lot of connection from the garage into the convention center, whether I need some type of, rather than striping, whether I need some kind of pedestrian actuated signal or flashing lights or something.
Mr. Ray, I'm interrupting.
which-
Based on
Mis-
planning board, Mr. Ray understands that.
Yes. And he'll talk about, we discussed that at that intersection where the new signal's going, but we didn't talk about it down here because that wasn't part of the last application.
I understand. I just, since we're talking about pedestrian circulation, those are items that we will have to,
Yes.
I guess, flush out in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Miskovic. Mr. Alfieri, I'm looking at the clock and I'm just trying to work some housekeeping in. You have a lot of folks to testify. I'm going to want to get some public comment in. We generally break at 9:30 for the night. I'm 10:30, I'm sorry, 10:30 for the night. I'm thinking that I might want to invite public comment at about 10 o'clock. 10:10, some 10 o'clock to 10:10 to get some public comment in. That would be one. Two, upon Mr. Borden's testimony finishing, I would like to take a 10-minute break. I think everybody up here, including yourself, would like to take a breather, get some air. And just in closing, in other similar, I can't say similar applications, but in many other applications, I know it helps me, I know it helps the board members. We often will get the benefit of a rendering, something that we can actually see visually.
Three-dimensional.
Thank you, three-dimensional. The public can also see visually or three-dimensionally. And I would hope that somewhere along the line, your client perhaps can provide that assistance to the board, give us something three-dimensional as to what this is going to look like. With that, I'll let you finish up with Mr. Borden, and then I would like to take a break.
And we're finished with Mr. Borden unless you have questions.
Any further questions, board? No, then there's no further questions at that point. Then at this point, we're going to take a break. It's 9:03. Let's come back at 9:15.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. We are back on the record. Mr. Alfieri, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. We're going to be calling,
I think before you call the next witness.
I just have one more, to clarify one more thing. Could you just explain to me again why the housing was moved away from the medical center?
I mean, Vito would be probably the best.
Why yes. For the residents.
You're talking about the special needs?
Well, the women, yeah, the special needs.
Use the microphone. Bottom.
The special needs housing is where it's been all along from day one. We didn't move that. We just moved the medical research center over to the other.
But originally, the women who were being treated were going to live there. They were going to live there, correct?
Right, with MS. People with MS or special needs are going to live in that house. But they're not part of people getting treated. They'll not be treated. There's medical research.
Hang on, no one can hear you. Use this while we're waiting. Use this for now. Oh, never mind. Use that.
Hello?
Yes, Sal?
The medical research building is in the same place it's been all along. Medical housing is where it's been all along. Hasn't moved. What's moved is the medical research. That's come over to this phase of the project. The housing that's for special needs, our goal is to put people there with MS. No guarantee. As Mr. Gertner said, that we have to follow the rules, but we're trying to have people with MS there because I have 3,800 of them at Center State. They're not getting treatment there. What they're getting is that they have a preference to move if they have MS and come to that building.
But it's a research facility, not a medical practitioner facility. They're not treatment doctors there.
There's
No,
not people walking
Can
in
I
to
try
get.
to may I try to rephrase that? And it's also my recollection. In the beginning, at least, weren't those buildings or those uses somewhat interconnected?
It was my personal request that the doctors see people who had MS, what their lives were like. And I testified that I would ask that the staff that I hired would go through that building to see how it was to have MS and what they were working for.
So maybe the way, and again, if I misphrased the question that you're trying to get to, what are your plans now that the physical site is more separated than it was originally? What are your plans to achieve that goal, that those folks who are participating in the research see how those folks who suffer from the disease live?
Rotation. We're going to be working with the hospital with young scientists, young doctors. They will be asked to go over to that building. It worked for me.
Do you foresee, for instance, and again, if I'm belaboring it too, do you foresee, for instance, that some of those researchers may in fact have some of the non-qualified apartments in the,
Not those, the non-special needs, but the researchers will live in the other apartments that we'll be bringing in with another phase. But they won't live in the building with the special needs. Those are all handicap accessible, special. You know, there's a pool downstairs, there's physical therapy for them to have.
But one of the issues we have in another project we're working on is that although we're designing these units for special needs people, because of the COA regulations and how they have to be qualified for income, et cetera, and there's usually a waiting list, we can't control what ailment those people are going to have because we have no control over who's going to live there other than they're going to have special need qualifications. So we may have only 5 MS people. There may be disabled veterans. There may be other disabilities. Unfortunately, because of the state regulations and how these things are funded, we don't have control. The only benefit to the town, of course, is that they get those credits, double credits actually, for these units against their future co-obligation.
so what, if I may also then, maybe just gave kind of the answer. So one reason that may have led to that physical separation is the fact that since you can't guarantee that all the folks living in the special needs building will actually be
MS.
that the initial dream and desire to have them interconnected was lost a little bit.
Right.
Is that a fair?
It's true, and
global
we're
point?
doing a
Part of it.
We're doing another project where we expected 58 special needs housing units for a specific segment of the special needs population, and we're learning through the state and through COA, not COA because I don't know if they exist anymore, but the administrators that handle this, that we can't just pick who we want to live there. We have no control over who lives there. Plus, they have to meet the income qualifications. You can't have a family there. They have to be a single person.
We did a survey at Center State. John Gribben put it out. We just got it back. Went out to all 3,800 people. About 150 of them said that they would live in an apartment that we created for somebody with MS. So, and then we did that for Manalapan and the building that Sal's talking about. So we're not going to be short of people wanting housing with MS and being together, especially if they know I built it for MS. But I can't guarantee it because of all these regulations I'm going through with the state they're telling me, Mr. Cardinal, you can't tell us who we're going to put in that building. And I own the building. But they're telling me who I can put in the building.
Kind of get to, at least, whether you accept it or not, it's a different story, but at least that's the explanation. At the end of the day, I think it's a fair summary to say that one of the drivers for having the connection in the original application based on further knowledge and learning of the process, you can't guarantee that in any event, which made it easier from another perspective to have a little bit more physical separation. But I think the applicant has made the representation that in terms of setting up the research facility, that I'm going to use the word condition, that may be a little too strong, but as a condition to being a researcher, part of the rotation will have to be through those buildings at least to
Without
learn
a
that
doubt.
interact. Is that a fair summary of
Without
what
a
you're
doubt.
saying?
I mean, there'll be people with MS in that building.
Yeah.
One way or another, there will be. I'll do my best to make them all, but can't guarantee it. But certainly the rotation are going to, people working for me in the MS research building are going to see what it's like to live with somebody who's really severely handicapped with MS. I lived it. I want them to see it. They'll work a little harder if they see what I saw.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Alfieri.
The next witness is James Spano. I'll have him tell you what his specialty is because it's new to me.
Mr. Spano, you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Can you kindly give us, you have to use the mic, please.
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, your affiliation, and then the chairman will ask you what you do.
James Spano. I'm a renewable energy expert, developer, and financier.
Oh, a renewable energy expert? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
And then you said something after that.
Well, hang on, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. What's your affiliation?
I'm a president of Green Power Crossings, which is the power company that's powering this project.
Green what?
Green Power Crossings. Green Power Crossings.
Better.
And since your discipline is new to me and probably many of the board members, can you give a little more history and background as to what the specialty is, what it does, and your history as to how you developed this?
Sure. The specialty is in renewable energy, developing microgrids and renewable generation systems that will power buildings, projects similar to this. We build systems for schools, municipalities, municipal utilities, basically just providing alternative green power to local business owners and
If
public.
you would be so kind to, if you can parse out a little bit of what educational background you have or specific training you have that makes you particularly useful as an expert in guiding us through your testimony.
Sure. I'm the president of the New Jersey Solar Grid Supply Association. I'm the vice president of the Mid-Atlantic Solar and Storage Energy Industry Association. I'm the board member of the International Battery Energy Industry Alliance. I've been in the solar industry since 2004. I've testified as an expert in the largest lawsuit in solar industry in the United States. I'm a nationally recognized speaker. I speak on solar development and finance throughout the United States, and I'm called upon regularly by pretty much anybody that needs an expert in the solar industry or in the renewable energy industry.
And not to belabor it, I mean, I get the idea, but is there a particular educational background that comes with it? Are you an engineer by education, Or is there some specific training that you go through in order to render an opinion and an evaluation as to whether or not the renewable energy that you're going to obviously testify to as being worthy in this commercial development is something that is going to be a positive, and the reasons stated there, as opposed to, and I don't mean this in a demeaning sense, as a salesman. I want to know that you have a particular expertise and what you're basing your expertise on, if that helps, Yanni.
Sure, there is no accreditation in the renewable energy industry
Didn't know that.
specifically.
Okay.
I have developed more solar energy and renewable energy projects in New Jersey than any other developer in the state. I'm recognized by virtually, in fact, I chaired the solar transition team that wrote the Clean Energy Act of 2018 for Governor Murphy. I've pretty much been at the center of New Jersey renewable energy policy for the last 16 years.
All right. Okay, thank you. I accept your credentials. Mr. Alfieri, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jim, can you explain to the board what your design is and how that would work in conjunction with the development of the site?
Sure. I think this particular project is an exceptional project in that it's creating the first microgrid for a private development in the state of New Jersey. It's the largest privately owned microgrid. This project will operate on 100% clean energy, understanding that the 2018 Clean Energy Act and the 2020 Master Energy Plan signed by Governor Murphy require that we have 35% of our energy generation through renewable sources by the year 2025. We have to have 50% by the year 2030 and 100% by the year 2050. The 2050 goal is a goal of the Murphy administration under the Master Energy Plan. The 35% by 2025 and the 50% by 2030 are legislated requirements. This particular project meets every requirement and every goal of the Master Energy Plan. It's been developed in coordination with the Board of Public Utilities. We've worked with some of the top technical experts in the industry to put a team together to develop this particular project. It will enable this entire project to operate off-grid. So when we have a storm like Sandy, where we all experience complete decimation of our energy infrastructure, this particular project will actually continue to operate when that grid is down. All of the renewable or the solar panels that are placed all throughout the project, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But between the solar projects, a CHP, combined heat and plant, and a battery storage systems, we're going to be able to continue to power this facility during all grid outages and even long-term grid outages. This particular project will also act as an emergency shelter for the entire Jackson Township. Between the ability to power those hotels during a grid outage with our renewable energy systems, we'll be able to facilitate a significant benefit to the entire community. The project itself is a microgrid project, which means that we're generating all of the power on site and we're utilizing it all on site, which is the most efficient means of powering any facility, is have on-site generation. This particular project will provide grid services so that all the ratepayers in the area actually benefit as well. When the grid requires stabilization, it can access the power from this particular project to stabilize the frequency. This particular project will have immediate response to energy needs, so that when there's a requirement for power, instead of having to import power at a much higher cost, the grid and the utility is able to pull power from our site, that the excess power that we have in our reserves, and use that power to support the grid and all of the ratepayers, so that you don't have the excessive pricing spikes that occur when there's a grid outage, when there's a significant increase in demand on the grid. So this particular project Also facilitates the ability for the transition to an electric vehicle transportation system, which we're working on in the state of New Jersey. There'll be electric vehicle chargers placed throughout the site. That will enable, particularly in the parking garage, I should have noted that as well, the new electric vehicles that are coming out now, these EV chargers are designed to fast charge them so that when the guests come for an event, their cars are fully charged before they leave from that event. And that's particularly important when we're drawing people from long distances to this particular site. So the overall benefits of the master energy plan that we've designed for this particular site, that, as I said earlier, it coincides exactly with the master energy plan that the state has developed. And we've developed this in conjunction with the state. This particular project will be a hallmark project for the entire state of New Jersey. And I think Jackson Township will get the accolades for being the first to accomplish this type of a project.
Do you work in conjunction with the power companies in any way?
Yes, what we work with, JCP&L will actually be providing a 12.5 volt kilovolt line to our site. From that point on, we build the entire infrastructure and power the entire property. In the event that for any reason our system fails, which is virtually impossible, but if anything ever happened to our system, the grid is still available. We have the ability to transfer on or off grid as necessary. When there's an extreme power demand on our grid, we can literally pull our project completely off the grid, enabling the grid to provide the power to the rest of the loads that are necessary, that are putting stress on the lines that feed the projects, or actually feed the local community as well.
I've got to ask the question. When you say the entire project, just so I have it clear in my mind, so this entire project, as contemplated and as discussed and as planned out, when it is completely finished, all buildings are up, all pads are occupied, and this thing is running at 100%, this project is going to have a set of solar panels by itself that's going to provide electrical power to everybody that's in this project?
There'll be a combination of solar power, a combined heat plant, a CHP plant.
Say that again. What was that?
Can you describe what a combined heat plant
Thank you.
is?
Yes, it's a gas power generation system that creates a thermal load as well as an electrical load. So we're actually able to backfeed into the hotels, for example, the chillers, and provide the heat and the air conditioning for those units without actually having heating and air conditioning units in the buildings themselves. Through conduits, we run thermal power into those buildings and provide heat and the air conditioning. So it's just a more efficient way. When you produce power, you produce heat, whether you're burning coal or whether you're taking even from solar panels.
Sorry, it's natural gas?
Natural gas as well. When you combust.
No, it is natural gas? Is that what this combined heating?
Yes, the natural gas is what powers the CHP plant, yes. And the excess heat that's generated, instead of being dissipated into the air, we actually use it to make the entire project more energy efficient.
So those would be the two sources of power intended to run the entire project, to run this
Those
entire-
two sources of power are designed to run the entire project, along with a battery storage system that will be storing excess power to be used for immediate, it's called the UPS, uninterrupted power sources.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Will there be any sort of backup generator?
No, there will be no on-site generators. They're not necessary. The CHP plant is the actual generator. It's a huge generation facility.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Castillo.
Through the chair, the CHP plant you're referring to, can you give a description of it, where it will be located on the facility, how large footprint
Sure,
it takes?
Yeah, there's a building, Ian, maybe you could identify where that building is?
Which plan do you need up, Ian? That good?
That's A3. That's fine. If you scroll up more. These are the athletic fields at the bottom of phase one. It will be in the area on phase three in this area.
And how large of a footprint is this taking?
We've allocated a footprint approximately, boy, I'm trying to remember. I believe it was about 10,000 square feet. 10 to 12,000 square feet in a block building, basically a masonry, single-story building.
And how large of a field of solar panels are you proposing to supply?
Well, the solar panels are the various panels identified on the site plans.
So you won't have as per your design, well, what we've seen on the plans, the parking lots will have canopies.
Correct.
So that's the only area of solar panels? There won't be
That's
panels on
correct. There's
buildings
no-
or open fields?
Right, there's no separate field of solar panels. They're all interspersed throughout the project in carports, and there will be panels as well on the rooftops.
So, and then I'm sorry, the CHP plant will also contain the battery storage facility? How is that dispersed?
Yes, the battery storage facility is actually paired. It's going to be a combination. It's not a single battery storage system. There will be a battery storage system within the CHP plant, but there's also battery storage systems in every single residential unit on the site as well. On all of the residential units are going to have an energy storage unit along with a solar systems that'll be in the front parking lot. Unlike the rest of the entire site is going to be powered by that microgrid. The residential section is going to be powered off of the solar plus storage, a separate system. That's not a true microgrid, but it's what's called islanding. So that it's called islanding. So we'll be able to take the entire residential load off of the grid at any given time, just like I'm able to do with the microgrid. But with the microgrid, it's one master plant with a bunch of solar everywhere, powering the entire site, whereas the residential units, each particular unit will have its own separate power system along with pulling the energy from the solar systems, but it'll have its own storage system powering each particular unit separately.
So then as a tenant, how is a tenant be charged to use these?
That's actually one of the amazing things about this particular plan for those tenants. One of the goals of the Mass Energy Plan was to provide low and middle income families with affordable power, affordable energy. What we're doing here is by generating revenue using those combined solar systems in that residential area, we actually feed that power back into the grid, and we absorb power from the grid when the grid has too much power and it takes the frequency off. So what we're actually doing here is we're providing grid services and getting paid by the utility for those services. So we're able to put these units into these homes at no cost for the people. The combination of having no cost for the storage units and providing them complete resiliency, particularly for the units for the disabled. I happen to be a strong advocate for people with disabilities. I'm on several boards. I've been on hospital boards. I'm on the New Jersey Cerebral Palsy Association board. I've been on the Community Options board. I have a daughter with cerebral palsy. It's quadriplegic. So I have a tremendous interest in providing services and enabling inclusion, people with disabilities to live in an inclusive environment. What these units do is it provides power particularly for these people with disabilities, so that when they become disabled, when there's a power shortage, if they have oxygen machines or other equipment that's electrically powered, what we do now at Community Options, we actually have to transport all these people from their group homes. We transport them by ambulance to the hospital, and they have to actually be admitted into the hospital where there's power available during power outages. Now we'll be able to facilitate these people to remain in their homes like the rest of us. They'll be able to have 24/7 power by having those batteries recharged from the solar systems daily. So even if we had an extended outage, they don't have to be moved out of their homes and they can remain there. By putting these systems in at no cost and covering the capital cost of putting them in through grid services, we're able to provide a much lower cost of power also for the people that are living in these facilities, so that Typically, if they wanted to have that backup power, as we all know, you're going to spend $8, $10, $12,000 for a generator. They'll actually have that backup power at no cost now.
In the, excuse me, through the chair.
Go.
In phase 3, which is not there yet, right? Are you predicting more solar panels to go up there?
Yes, sir. We have a complete plan for all the phases. We brought it, I don't know, there's a company called Greener by Design that is one of the states. They've done most of the master plans for most of the cities, and like right now they're doing the entire Woodbridge. We brought them in as part of our team. They've designed these all over the country for last, say, 7, 8 years. So we'll have as I said, this is from the state of New Jersey. Everybody in the BPU, everybody in the legislature that I've worked with, they're all excited about this project because of the benefits that it provides, not specifically for the project, but for the state of New Jersey and its residents.
But to answer the specific question, there are solar panels that will be located on phase 3 as well.
Yes, the entire project is being powered by
So
either
what
solar.
are
or
your
CHP.
predictions to the amount of solar panels that you're going to be looking at, the total?
I think we have roughly 9 megawatts worth of power to power all the loads on this particular site.
All right, so if
Do you know what the demand of the site is?
That's where I was just going to go. That's based on the current estimates of the tenants that the developer is expecting to be on this site. That is a fluid number that will change based on the load demands of the tenants that actually ultimately sign leases or occupy the site.
So your
Now,
max,
if there is a damaged area, is there alarms that will go off in your system to show you where the leaks are?
Leaks of
Damaged solar panel leakage.
solar panels don't leak. There's no
If somebody throws a rock and breaks one of the solar panels.
it's just glass. Silicon is a solid. There's no leakage, no.
So your system doesn't have a backup if there's leakage at all?
Well, there isn't any leakage. These systems solar systems do not have any leakage. If the worst case, and actually speaking of, if a glass breaks, these things are designed to even take, hail at 110 miles per hour. So through Sandy, for example, I didn't have a single panel. I have panels all over the state of New Jersey. I didn't have a single panel that glass broke on.
Mr. Spano, assume we know nothing about solar panels, generation of the electricity, how it's going to be transported, what type of cables you use, whether it's going to be exposed to people that are walking through the place, whether or not it can be hit by a baseball or a lacrosse stick. Are there safety issues involved in this configuration that you're putting together? And if there are, how are you addressing them?
Yeah, there are no safety issues with the solar systems. The only safety issue you might have is with a CHP plant, and that's designed within that masonry building for that specific purpose. But the panels that are placed on the canopies, rooftop, and over the walkways around the baseball fields, they're designed to where even if balls, come and land on them, they don't break. There's no damage to them whatsoever.
And then how does the energy that comes from the solar panel get around the site?
All of the solar panels are wired together. Wires go through an inverter, converting it from AC to DC, and then the power lines go through conduits underground and go from the panel to wherever the load is.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Hurley.
Mr. Spano, the only question, I understand what you've been talking about, believe it or not, about the solar panels. But my concern is with these storage batteries. Storage batteries, you indicated, are in multiple locations. Some may be in residential areas.
Yes.
Storage batteries by themselves generate their own heat internally. What happens if there's how do you protect against a fire, especially in a residence? Is there any protection relative to these storage batteries? And what kind of storage batteries are they?
Yes, that's actually the last question is the key question. The type of storage units that we're using are lithium phosphate, they're iron phosphate, which means they have a thermal runaway of 110 degrees. What people are typically concerned with is batteries like the car batteries, like the Tesla battery or the Powerwall that they use, even though they use it in a residence, which I wouldn't do. Those type of batteries do have thermal runaway of 8,300 degrees, and they literally can explode, and they do explode. There's been, I think, 11 explosions in Europe already for, with the Tesla Powerwall batteries. The batteries that we're using have 110 degrees maximum heat. There is no thermal runaway whatsoever.
Mr. Spano, let me interrupt you for a moment, all due respect. My attic will hit 110 degrees. That's my concern. I mean, these things do create heat. If they have is that when they explode at 110?
No, that's the maximum amount of heat that comes out of them. So in other words, if they overheated
How much can they
110
stand?
degrees Fahrenheit.
How much can they stand?
I believe that, I don't have an engineer here, but I believe that it can be up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are deployed and they're permitted to be deployed literally in the living rooms of apartments. They're like a refrigerator appliance.
So let's assume, God forbid, there's a fire. How do these batteries react in a fire?
These batteries are completely enclosed. They're not subject to any worst case scenario. They would melt. But there's, as I said, there's only 110 degree thermal runaway. There is no explosions that could occur with these batteries. And we'll provide, all of the specs and fire safety codes that these meet as well.
So if they get hot enough to melt.
No, they don't get hot enough to melt. If there was a fire in the unit and they were exposed to the fire, they would melt. They won't melt from their own internal heat.
If they reach a temperature where they would melt, would they not explode?
No, they don't. The material itself would melt from the external fire. These do not have any, it's not even possible for them to explode. That's why they've been designed to be put inside units as opposed to typical batteries are outside the home like a generator would be. This actually, throughout Europe, there's 50,000 of these deployed all through Europe. Throughout the United States, let's see, Rocky Mountain Power out of Utah just deployed 600 of these units to provide resiliency to their own grid. So these, and they're all in apartments. I'm installing 20,000 of these in Texas due to you're probably not familiar with it, but when all the wind power went down in Texas, power spiked, and what was normally 6 cents a kilowatt hour went to $6,000 a kilowatt hour. People were getting $40 million bills in some hotels, put a bunch of people out of business. So now what they're using these systems to prevent that from happening in the future by putting 20,000 units in individual homes. When there's a demand for power, they have to pull from the reserves of all those batteries. So this is actually technology that's becoming mainstream in the United States.
Who regulates this? Does the building department have to review?
Fire departments review these. They have to, pass the fire codes. They're subject to the building codes, the EEC code. So yeah, the battery systems are regulated by the electrical codes. The solar systems are actually regulated by the Board of Public Utilities.
Is there any, excuse me, is there any maintenance required in these batteries?
Occasionally, they actually come with a 25-year maintenance program with a 25-year warranty. So that for the first 25 years that they're in that home, there's not expected to be any maintenance. These are stationary batteries. They're just like you have a bunch of batteries, then you have an inverter and a battery management system, and they're all in an enclosed bin that's maybe 6 feet high, 2 feet wide, 3 feet across. And they're completely
Look,
enclosed.
I'm old enough to know that way back when we used to put water in these batteries, and we'd have to check it to make sure the water level was there. Do we need any kind of requirement in that regard?
No, those are
Self-sealed?
cobalt batteries. Yeah, That's a completely different chemistry. These are completely enclosed batteries. You never touch them. There's no fluid in them at all.
One more last question. On the amount of electricity that's coming in, how much do you allow it to go back into the system so JP&L will get their supply?
Zero. JCPL will not allow us to backfeed into their grid.
Good.
So they want to maintain their grid. We keep all of our power on site. When there's excess power generated by the solar systems, they go in and they feed into the batteries and fill up the battery reserves.
You said Jackson's going to benefit from this.
Yes.
How?
Several ways. One, your grid is, the utility lines that you have are more resilient. Two, when we put in these systems, we're what's called end of the line system. So we're providing, we're able to breathe in and out of the grid from the very end of the distribution line. So if you took from a power plant and you went through the substation and then you went through all the different distribution lines until you get to where your building is at the very end of the line. Those are the buildings that typically are affected by the brownouts and the blackouts first, because they're at the very end of that power line. When the power runs through the line, it doesn't get down to that far. We're providing the ability, when that happens, for our batteries to push the power back in the grid from the backside. And when the grid has too much power, we're able to suck power out of the grid so that they can maintain the frequency, so that you don't have your electronic equipment blowing out and all the shorts on your electrical systems.
Power surges.
Correct. But you also, the residents actually also significantly benefit, because when there is a big power outage, we have power and we're able to provide emergency power, whether that's cell phone recharging. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's the cell phones. When you don't have power, you don't have communication. That means the police, emergency services, nobody has the ability to recharge their communications. By having this huge power system that's available, you're not only able to charge all the communications, you're also able to provide housing, food, storage, shelter for people that are out of their homes because of the storms and so forth. So when the grid goes out, this place will be the shining star of in fact, Great Adventure, they put 20 megawatt worth of solar onto their property. But guess what? When the grid goes out, they're dark. Our project will be lit up and operating and available to all the Jackson residents.
As the emergency shelter,
Correct.
but not to backfeed into the grid.
Correct.
I have a question.
Yes.
Back to the solar panels. What happens if a solar panel gets hit by lightning? How does it react?
If it gets what?
Struck by lightning?
If a solar panel got struck by lightning, it would probably melt. The solar panels are all grounded just like any other equipment. So if you're concerned about a power surge going through our solar panels and into the grid, that's not even possible. First of all, we're off grid, but even if we were connected to the grid at the time that the lightning struck, what the lightning would do is it would blow out my inverters. The power would hit my panels. Some of it may go through my lines and hit my inverter and would blow my inverter out. And then that would be the end of it.
How long does it take to repair something like that? Would there be a...
That's an interesting question. Typically, I would say 1 day. Today, it takes a little longer because the supply chain for the renewable energy industry was affected by COVID, and sometimes there's longer delays in getting equipment than we used to have. So we're starting to experience some longer delays, but typically, once that supply chain gets resolved, you're going to be responding within hours typically, but we give a 24-hour guarantee to the developer that we'll be out there to repair that. And we have a monitoring station that monitors every single panel within the entire project.
Thank you.
One last question, if I may.
Yes,
I'm still on the safety issue here, particularly with the residential units themselves. When the power is stored in the battery, it's stored as DC, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then from there, it goes through a transformer, converts to AC.
Goes to an inverter, yes.
What if one of these transformers goes out in the residence in which you may have a family that is affected with MS and they need some type of electrical facility, and all of a sudden, wherever the transformer is, I know transformers will break down. What happens?
Okay, first, we're not connected to transformers at all. That's on the grid side. We're actually going right into the electrical system of the home, and we're using an inverter to convert from AC to DC. So by the time the power gets into that home, it's already converted to DC. And it just goes straight into the storage unit. When it comes out of the storage unit, it'll be, there's an inverter within the storage unit that inverts it back to AC as well.
Okay, same question, but is there maintenance required on the inverters? Does someone inspect the inverters to make sure that you're getting the AC power that is going to be required by the units that may be needed for the residents in some of these facilities?
Okay, there's two inverters involved. There's the solar inverter, which is, we have a bunch of canopies over the parking lot.
Right.
There's all that power goes to a series of inverters. Then there's the inverter within the home, so that when the storage, within the storage unit, there's a mini, what's called a mini inverter. It's a small little inverter. Those typically do not have any problems at all. But if an inverter goes out there, then we do have to send a technician out to replace that inverter. I can tell you this, as I mentioned earlier, I have a child with cerebral palsy who's quadriplegic and completely reliant on all kinds of medical equipment, even an air fluidization bed. She can't even lay in the bed without a huge power draw. I have the same exact unit in my home. So if I felt there was any safety concern, it wouldn't be in my own home. These have, and we can provide, all the backup as far as the safety of these units. There's plenty of support to provide.
Do you have any renderings of these? It sounds like it's almost the size of a refrigerator.
Roughly, it's like a thin refrigerator, maybe a Sub-Zero type refrigerator that's a little thinner. But yes, that's about the size of it.
Are they kept in a separate room or?
I keep mine in the laundry room. I'm putting 29 of these units in community option group homes in New Jersey. We're putting them, some in the garage, some in the living room, some in the utility room. So they literally can be placed wherever it's convenient within the home, wherever there's space availability. And in some instances, like people that are more interested not in the economics of the systems, but in the green aspect of the systems, they typically put them in their living rooms as a showpiece.
Are they able to move them around themselves?
No, they're very heavy. Once they're set there, they stay there, and our technicians would have to move them if you decided you wanted to move them from one place to another. And they have to be wired because they're all wired into the electrical system. So if you move them, it's not like a plug and play where you just move it. They're hardwired into the electrical system.
Okay, I mean, to follow up on Mr. Hurley's safety concern, I almost feel like it's something that should be kept in like a fire safe room or something.
Again, these have no fire issues. There's never been one. It's not even chemically, physically, physics say that these things cannot explode. So there is no real fire damage from them. And that the fire departments, these are deployed all over the United States. So it's not like, they're in my home already. So you know that they've already passed code here in New Jersey.
No, not yet. Mr. Hill, did you have?
Yeah, I just want to remind the board that this phase one application that we're reviewing does not contain any residential. All right. I think the applicant here is selling a concept at this point that ultimately they want other phases that do contain residential to have this technology and ability. But we don't have any applications in front of us for that residential at this point, nor do we have architectural plans. And I think it may be more appropriate to, at that time, ask questions about the safety of batteries storage in the residential sections. Right now, we're not approving or looking to approve. They're not seeking any residential as part of this application. But I do have some
questions regarding the overall concept that Mr. Spano is presenting. With a micro, I just want to confirm, with microgrids and what you're proposing on this site, you still cannot be an island generator for the utility, correct?
No, incorrect. We can be.
You can be.
Yes.
Okay.
It is our intent to operate that way.
Pardon?
It is our intent to operate that way as
Okay.
an islanded system.
Okay. Because obviously the big solar project, grid connected projects aren't allowed to.
Correct.
The solar, you were talking about the solar for the low to moderate income. Is that part of the community solar program?
No.
No. Okay. So you're not reliant on you're not reliant on New Jersey's community solar program for that?
No.
Okay. Are the warehouses proposed to have solar as well?
That's not been determined yet. They're not part of the main, they're sort of set aside from the Adventure Park project that we're powering.
So what's the overall capacity of the microgrid? Was that 9 megawatts or was that just the solar component?
Right now, that's I think 9 megawatt solar, 6 megawatt CHP. And we have 4 megawatt coming in through the grid that we're currently using temporarily, but we'll be replacing and releasing that back into the grid.
And what's the battery storage component?
That's actually not been determined yet. We're going to have a 20 kilowatt battery in each of the residences, but the centralized battery storage hasn't been determined, and it will not be determined until the state comes out with their battery incentive program, because we'll obviously design the system around the economic benefits of the incentive program that's been part of the 2018 law that just hasn't been announced yet by the BPU.
So the capacities that you just provided, that's for the overall development?
Those are generation capacities. The battery.
But that's for the overall development?
Correct.
Okay, I think we need to really focus on what's in front of us, the phase one. So what is the solar capacity for this application, just the phase one?
Just under 2 megawatts.
2. What's the CHP capacity for just this phase?
CHP is not being brought in until phase 2.
So there's no
CHP in phase 1 yet.
Kind of confused why we would talk about it here then if we're here for phase 1.
We're just trying to help the board to understand the way that we are managing this project to meet the master energy plan that the state came out with. In order, the master energy plan requires 100%, ultimately 100% of your power from green energy. We're meeting that by 2050. We're meeting that standard in 2020, whatever we get this project out.
And just to add a little color to that before you keep going, Evan, Mr. Cardinality was so proud of this aspect of the project that he insisted that Mr. Spano tell you about it.
Sure.
It doesn't really add anything to our application. It doesn't support the variances. But he's so proud that he's so far ahead of what's coming down the pike. That's why he wanted Mr. Spano to explain it to you. So I know it resulted in a lot of questions, but we didn't have to tell you about it, and we still could have done it.
No, that's fine, but I think we need to clarify for this application,
Yeah.
what is proposed as part of the site plans that are in front of us.
I agree.
Versus something that may or may not happen in other phases. I just want to draw that distinction. All right. So is the microgrid going to be operational just for this phase?
No.
So there is no, okay. Not for this phase. We'll say for this phase, is there a requirement to obtain any PJM approvals for the solar?
Not PJM approvals. You require BPU approvals.
Okay, we also BPU, but also JCP&L Part 1.
Correct.
Has that been submitted?
Yes.
Okay, so a Part 1 is submitted.
Correct. We actually, the initial power for phase 1 is actually grid power that's coming directly from the grid. As we develop we put all the infrastructure in for the renewable energy in phase 1, but we actually won't go vertical on phase 1 until, I'm sorry, we won't go vertical on the renewable energy until phase 2, And then we'll be replacing the grid power that was initially used for phase one.
Okay, so the solar component is not going to be constructed as part of the
vertical construction.
Okay, so the solar
Right.
will not be constructed until phase 2 of the project starts.
Correct, sir.
Okay. And I think that comes into play with the developer's agreement when you talk about timing and developer requirements and so on. It's kind of difficult to, it's kind of difficult I just want to make sure that the developer is not tied to, hey, look, why didn't you install solar yet? But you're asking for a CO kind of thing. So I think that's an important distinction for the developers.
And particularly as well, and I'm asking this open-ended, the CHP structure is in phase 3. We don't even have a phase 3
No.
in front of us.
Yeah. No, I think I appreciate you answering my questions. I think we just need to keep it simple and specific to this application. I mean, I think the presentation for the overall development is good, but I think it probably would have been more appropriate at the GDP time, or if you come back in to amend the GDP. I'm not certain what your intention there is. But I mean, this is the future of renewable energy. And I just, again, want to think that it's important that we focus on the application in front of us rather than future.
May I ask Mr. Hill and perhaps the witness as well? For instance, we're talking about the parking garage. Will the parking garage in its design have solar panels
The parking garage will have solar panels above the parking garage, yes.
on the whatever?
The top floor, yes.
So any rendering would show that as an example.
Yes, it will.
So, okay, so does that affect the heights, the building heights that are indicated on these plans?
There'll be no, we're not seeking height relief, but I don't know the specific height that I can't comment on.
It really depends on the type of system because,
Right.
Usually they're about 5 to 6 feet above the parapet walls, if not a little higher. So now you can be adding up to 8 feet in general above the height of the structure that's listed here. So as long as it's not required to have any more variances, that's fine. Just put it on the record.
You good?
That's all I have.
Mr. Alfieri, I'm looking at the clock. It's 10:15. Nope, I'm sorry, Mr. Miskovich.
Panel-related question. Did I hear you correctly? You said that there will be electrical charging stations in the garage for electric vehicles?
That's correct.
Do they require a wider space than 9 foot wide?
No, actually, the EV chargers, first of all, I clarify and I should make note of this too. The canopies, I know there was a question earlier about parking space in the canopies. Our canopies actually don't restrict a single, they're designed so that you don't lose a single car space with them. As far as when we put a EV charger in, it's put in and they're more designed for like the compact, inside the garage will be more the compact cars that will have access to the EV. There will be EV chargers outside for the larger vehicles.
Okay, and that was the plan doesn't show where they might be spread out through the site. So I think as the site plan develops, we'll have to at least designate how many and where they might be because they have a large property. And then the question rises of what percentage spaces require charging. So
There's no code requirement.
I
There's a
understand.
practical requirement.
I understand, but that may affect other parking spaces because I don't know if people understand they can park there or not park there.
Sure.
So I think as they develop the site plan,
They'll be
to look
restricted,
that we
yep.
have to look at that, and maybe Mr. Ray can address that next meeting.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miskovich. Mr. Alfieri, as I'm looking at the clock, we're a little after 10:15. If that concludes Mr. Spano's testimony?
It does.
It does? All right. Then what I would like to do at this point, I would like to open it to the public and seek public comment and questions and focus the public in on the testimony that they've heard tonight to raise questions and concerns as to Mr. Alfieri's witnesses and or Mr. Cardinality. And I'm assuming at this point, ladies and gentlemen of the board, there's no further questions? All right, thank you. Then with that, I'll open the session to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to be heard? Anthony, I'm seeing on the screen that you so kindly provide for me, 33 participants, attendees are 30. But I don't necessarily, I see a hand up with some numbers. Eight, so we have 8 folks that would like to be heard. All right. Oh, and it's rising. It's going up to 11. Okay. All right, let's begin.
This is for questions, right?
Questions from the public, yes. All right. Is the first one up, is that Karen Argenti? All right. Ms. Argenti, are you there? Hello, Ms. Argenti? We see your name, but we
Yeah, I'm here. You kind of like did something to us.
Right.
Okay.
can't hear you. Can't see-
Yeah,
Hang on. Do you have do you have a camera on yourself so that you can appear on the screen?
oh, right, sorry. Yes. Hi.
There we go. Mr. Gertner's going to swear you in.
Ms. Argenti,
Okay.
can you kindly raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the questions that you're about to present to the board or to the applicant's witnesses will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And again, and this is for your benefit as well as the applicants, as the chairman indicated, your questions should be directed to the testimony we've heard just far and not comments yet as to the overall application.
Okay.
And one additional ground rule, Ms. Argenti, it's about 10:20 right now. There are about 10 other folks right now that do want to be heard as well. So we have a rule of 5 minutes. So if we're getting close to you passing the 5 minutes in your questions, I may have to cut you off. Not to be rude, but we want to get to as many people as possible, okay?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, ask away.
So I have a question for the board.
Know where she
Wait,
lives.
we didn't get your address.
Oh, my address is 61 Clear Lake Road, Whiting, New Jersey.
And where? I'm sorry.
Whiting,
And how far do you live from the site?
I don't know, about probably 20 miles, 15 to 20 miles.
Okay, Ms. Argenti, you may ask away.
Okay, so I have a question for the board. Chairman? Is that allowed?
If I can answer it, I will. If I cannot, I may defer to others with more knowledge in this area than me.
Oh, okay, yeah. I have information from a Oprah that I did at the Ocean County Soil and Water Conservation District. And I have information that there are two violations, at least two violations that we know of in New Jersey, DEP, and two violations for the Ocean County Soil and Conservation District. That there are other problems with this application which have implications for in fact, the violations before the DEP are in Lot 2 and Lot 4. So it has concern for this area. And my question to the board is, why would you even consider talking about approving anything that this group has put together when we can't even be assured that they know how to do a very simple thing like fill out an application correctly? In fact, I think,
I object.
build a wetland from the application. And you all have copies of these. The two violations from the New Jersey DEP and the two violations from the Ocean County Soil Conservation District were presented to the town.
Well, so a couple of things. Well, why don't you lay your objection on the record?
Well, first, we didn't offer any testimony tonight about soil conservation or DEP issues, number one. Number two is any outside agency that we have an issue with, we have to address. It's not a township issue, it's an outside agency issue. And we will at some point provide testimony to the board to explain all of that.
Is he using up my time?
No, we're answering your question.
No, but I didn't ask him the question. I asked the board the question. I asked the board,
But ma'am, the issue is if if the applicant's attorney perceives that your question is not relevant or proper, the applicant, because this is a quasi judicial hearing, has the opportunity to lay that objection upon the record. One of the bases of his objection is that the testimony tonight, because it's truncated, did not address soil conservation issues. And that is one of the bases of the objection. And I would respectfully
Sustain that objection.
sustain that objection. It's beyond the scope. Secondarily, as mentioned by the applicant and in general, and an assist to the chairman to answer that question, generally speaking, first of all, your question had an incorrect presumption. This is a separate board, separate from the township, that relies on evidence. So just because something is or is not part of the quote-unquote township does not necessarily mean that the board has it, because the board ultimately is governed by, in broad context, the rules of evidence. And if something's not presented, it's not before the board. So I can tell you that that information is not before the board. I can make that.
from the Ocean County Soil Conservation District.
So what you need to do is.
No, I accept that. I accept that. But the DP letter,
Try to help you.
I appreciate that. But the DP letter went to the Jackson Township zoning official.
Okay, but that's not the board. So let me try again. And the public has the right to present information. What you should do, because these applicants are going to come back, is the results of your Oprah request should be pre-marked as exhibits, pages 1 to however many pages they are. They can be emailed to the zoning officer. I would then have the obligation to forward whatever you send to the applicant's attorney, and we can all be prepared to address in whatever way it's
Good
determined.
job. I'm fine. I'm happy. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yep.
Ms. Sargenti. All right. Who's next? Who do you have up next, Tony? I see 9 hands up, but I don't have a name yet associated. That's dropped to 7. An Aros Bayan, Mr. Bayan, are you there? A 20-second delay. Oh, thank you.
You hear me?
Is this Miss Bayan?
Yes, it is. It's R.S. Bayan. I'm at 846 Perineville Road, which is about 500 feet from this project.
Slow down, slow down, slow
So-
down.
so-
First, we want to see you. We can't see you yet. Can
Let
you,
me see. Start video.
you got a camera with a slash through it.
I see that too, and I don't know why. It says start video. Easy camera, virtual background. I would have to go into my video settings, and I don't think we have time for that, honestly.
Let me ask my counsel if it's okay for us to proceed with question and answer without.
Does the applicant have any issue?
No
with this
issue.
Okay.
All right.
Ma'am, so we're going to take your word that you're raising your right hand. You
Yes, sir.
solemnly swear or affirm that the questions you're about to present to the applicant or the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So help me God.
Can you give us, please, your full name, spell your last, and your address, please?
My name is R.S. Bayan, B-A-Y-A-N, and I reside at 846 Perineville Road, Jackson, New Jersey, of course. I'm within 500 feet of this project.
All right, Ms. Bayan, I'm presuming you heard what I said to the prior
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I did.
So those would apply to you as well. So if you have any questions specific to the testimony
Yes,
you heard,
yes.
you may ask those questions.
Sure. First, I'd like to say that it's refreshing to hear that we have new board members that pose questions and seem sincerely concerned about this project. I'm a little confused. I was under the impression that this application was just for variances for a sign and for the parking garage. But it appears as though there's all kinds of changes being made. So I'm wondering, is this a blanket approval of the MS housing now being separated from the apartments and the larger stormwater basin and these other things that have been changed and modified? Is this a blanket approval, or are we only focusing on the sign and the garage?
The entire project, phase one.
Okay, so these amendments, nobody knew about until this evening? The changes in the MS housing, the research facility being separated and things of that, and the larger stormwater basin, because that's my real concern. I have well water and I have propane. So, you know, the larger basin and already encroaching on the wetlands with your stormwater drain off and the warehouses that you're proposing, and the bamboo and all these different changes are just sudden as of this evening. So I'm just confused as to how in this a little bit of time we can wholeheartedly think that, you know, this should be approved without any further research. Have any of the board members actually walked phase one or phase two of this project? Have any of the board members actually walked the site?
Mr. Gertner, is that a question that's proper in these circumstances? It's something that we are required to answer?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, you go.
No, and as far as the stormwater management, our engineer, when he testifies, will go into all detail as to how the stormwater management system is designed and operates.
Yeah, so ma'am, I was just gonna say, I appreciate that, Mr. Alfieri, that what this board has traditionally done, even when an applicant hasn't completed their full application, is permitted public comment based on what you've heard so far. So saying it another way, because the applicant hasn't finished the application yet, some of the questions regarding stormwater that you're concerned about, they will be presenting testimony at the meeting to which they will be carried, which will be announced after public.
Okay, so what you're saying is, see, I'm sorry, but I'm confused. It appears as though we approve everything and then we figure it out, and then we see if it's detrimental, and then we see if it's not. You mean, I don't understand your approval process. If you first approve and then you say, well, we'll figure that out later, or we'll tell you about that later, or we'll get into the details later. I don't understand how you can approve something without having all the proper information and you know, to approve something. I'm sorry, I'm just confused. That's all. And as far as the disabled are concerned, with the no guarantee of there being MS patients in the facility, they just have to be, quote, disabled. Would that include behavioral disorders? Would that include drug addiction? Would that include, you know, could it be a halfway house, so to speak, if you're not guaranteeing that this is just going to be MS patients?
Well, it won't be a halfway house because it's the purpose of affordable housing obligations are to provide stable, affordable housing. So that's one thing. How the state combines, how the State Department of Human Services combines with affordable housing obligations is a complete regulatory maze and a myriad of regulations that I don't think there's anyone here who is qualified to opine. And even if, quite frankly, someone said they were qualified to opine, I think they would not be, they'll sell you a bridge in Brooklyn.
Sure. I'm just under the impression that it was approved for an MS, under the impression that it was for MS patients. And now that after
No, so respectfully, in my opinion, this is for the board and the public. So in my opinion, I think the applicant is being forthright, respectfully, that's at least this issue, indicating that the original approval wanted to make certain, from the board's perspective, to protect the municipality, wanted to make certain that the municipality received its rightfully deserved affordable housing credits. It is neither the applicant nor the township's fault that COA regulations are so messed up that that localities don't have the level of control that, if I were a legislator, I would argue they deserve. That being said, the applicant in this instance, in my opinion, this is really for the board and the public, has been forthright and said that the housing they intend to provide will be dedicated to those disabled and special needs folks who require housing, and there will be an affordable housing element pursuant to whatever the current COA regulations are to ensure that the municipality receives, in fact, the double credits that it deserves. It said, and I think the testimony was, if I'm summarizing correct, the applicant, quite frankly, agrees with you. It's actually not happy that they can't direct an entire MS wing to the affordable housing or the disabled, but they're stuck with that. And from the municipality's perspective, it's important that the town, receive its affordable housing credits.
Ms. Baird, I hope that answers your question and sheds some light on it. We appreciate your getting on and asking questions, but I do have to move on to the next public member who wishes to be heard, as we've exhausted that 5 minutes, but thank you. All right. Anthony, who do you have up next? Okay. Tracy, are you there yet? Hello, Tracy.
Hello, sorry, it was restarting. How are y'all doing?
It's actually us, because we have to remember there's a 20-second delay.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Ma'am, if you raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear from the questions you're about to present to the board or the applicant will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please.
Tracy McKinney, last name McKinney. Address is 7 Holly Tree Court. I believe I'm within 500 feet of this project.
Ms. McKinney?
Yes.
Heard some of the instructions to the other public? Okay.
Yep.
With that, you may ask your question.
So it was kind of hard to see when you were talking about traffic signals. You did discuss a traffic signal being installed. I believe it was going to be kind of in that main section where the trucks go through between A, B, and C phase. Is that correct?
Mr. Alfieri answered. Did you hear him?
I did not.
Yes.
Okay. So in our last, the other meeting we had a couple weeks ago, we were told that those systems, or it was discussed that they would not be installed because they had to be warranted and tested that they were needed. Is that correct?
Yeah, and our traffic engineer didn't get to speak yet. Well, he won't speak tonight, but he'll provide more testimony on that point at the next meeting.
So was that warranted where it will be installed and fully functioning upon the building of phase 1?
Again, he'll answer that in detail at the next meeting. The planner who provided testimony just gave an overall layout of what's being proposed on the site. He didn't provide the technical testimony necessary to describe the traffic signal and how it would be implemented.
So as of right now, we don't know if there's going to be a fully functioning one, correct?
I do, but the board doesn't because they didn't hear testimony.
Okay, so the board doesn't know. So as of right now, as far as they know, there may or may not be a fully functioning.
No, there's nothing there.
Okay, good enough. My other question for you is for the parking spots. I know you guys slightly touched on the EV spots and how many that would take up. My numbers might be off. I was trying to write it as we went. Originally, 2,757 were required, and currently you guys got it approved for 2,470 plus 1 spot for every 100 square feet instead of the 50 square feet required. right now you're saying it's 39,000 square feet would be required with those numbers. So what you're proposing is 1,430 spots less than the 3,900 required at this point. You're asking for a waiver for those 1,430 spots. Is that correct?
Generally, yes, but
Okay.
there'll be testimony to support that. There hasn't been yet.
And we don't know how many of the additional spots would not be potentially available for regular cars. So it could be more, another 100 or whatever that would not be for regular car, but only for EV cars, correct?
Again, the traffic engineer will get into that.
Okay. So why are we looking to, if we didn't have enough spots already, why are we looking to build another structure with spots instead of using land that you have for something else and potentially, keeping things as is, keeping your MS over by the housing where it's a little bit more convenient, and maybe making more spots somewhere else and taking down one of the extra structures that the community is against?
Well, I could answer that, but again, I think the traffic engineer would be the appropriate party to answer it. But just generally speaking, the ordinance has certain standards that doesn't take into account shared aspects of parking where somebody's already there for another event. They don't take into it, and the ordinance's standards aren't always the right standards, ITE standards that govern parking as well. So our traffic engineer will get into a lot more detail on the justification for that waiver.
So for the board, I'm just asking, you obviously don't have to answer, but I'd like to put on the record that I would like to not have this approved until we can actually hear from the traffic engineer.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the part, and this is not taking up your 5 minutes, I promise. But I want to make sure you understand specifically, and any other members of the public. Again, the reason this board has this policy to allow the public to ask questions even before an application is finished is to make sure that everyone, including the applicant, understands the concerns of the public. You still may not like their answer, and the board may not like their answer, but just be assured that the board does not have, the applicant has not closed their testimony yet, which means the board is not taking any action tonight.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. Okay. All right. I see 7 hands still up. Tony, who's next on the list? All right, Keith Joliffe. Okay, I'm going to wait 20 seconds this time. Mr. Joliffe?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and we can see you.
Hold on, let me turn my volume up. Hold on. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I could hear you.
Just, some of us may be getting dizzy. Can you hang your camera? Your camera's jiggling there a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to hold it as I'm talking to you folks.
All right.
I have an iPad. You know what? Maybe I'll put it down like this. Is that better?
Yeah, you'll do your best. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
If you raise your right hand, sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the questions you're about to present to the board the applicant will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please?
Sure. It's Keith Jolliffe. It's Jolliff like Frank E. And I live at 5 Holly Tree Court, Jackson.
Okay, Mr. Jolliffe, as you probably heard the others, we are focusing our questions to the applicant on testimony that you've heard. And because there are other folks that also wish to be heard, we're going to limit you to 5 minutes. So,
Sure.
question away.
Sure. I guess one thing I want to just clarify is, so is there going to be a separate section for comments, at another meeting? Because I know you said it's just questions, but I also have comments too.
Yes.
Would that be for another portion of the public next meeting maybe then, or?
As Mr. Gertner has explained, there will be a time when the applicant has completed his application. And at that time, we will entertain not only questions, but comments and your opinion as to whether or not the application should be approved. But as Mr. Gertner has explained to the others, and I'll state it again, there is a policy here that we try to give the public an opportunity to at least ask questions on that portion of the applicant's testimony that was given tonight. So,
I understand that. I'm only asking because the last planning board meeting on the 8th of March, I believe it was, we had no time for comments, and we were told the same thing. But and I just wanted to clarify that. That's fine. I guess the questions I have tonight, I guess my question for Mr. Cardinality or Mr. Alfieri, what is the potential tax impact on Jackson? I know Mr. Alfieri in past meetings has said there's no analysis required. I was just curious if any analysis like that has been done, and if it has, what does it show? I guess at a net effect, how it affects Jackson and that sort of thing.
We would love to, it's really not relevant to the application, but we would love to be providing you with that answer because it's a huge profit margin, profit generator for the town, but it's not a zoning issue. So we don't present that.
And why, I'm sorry, why is it not relevant?
Because it's not a zoning issue. It has nothing to do with zoning.
So that'd be more of a planning board type situation then, or?
No.
No, okay. So it's not relevant. I don't see how it's not relevant at all,
It
but.
may be
okay.
relevant to the town council when they adopt an ordinance to try and provide certain uses, but once it gets to the board level, it's not an issue. But it's a big tax rateable.
I know from what from these meetings I've attended, I've heard that a lot. I was just curious if there was any analysis done to that fact, but okay.
Take a look at what Great Adventure pays.
Okay. All right, and another question I have, and I don't know if this is applicable or not. This question I guess could be for Mr. Cardinale or Mr. Alfieri again. I think I know what you're going to say, but do you believe the market for the sports facility, for Venture Crossing, can be supported, considering the proposed trophy park down the street that's offering a lot of the same type things, sports and recreation, entertainment, that sort of thing? Have you guys done any market research to that effect as well, considering?
Again, it's other than the parking garage, it's permitted use, so it's not something that we need to show a need. My client wouldn't be investing hundreds of millions of dollars in a project that was destined to fail. They've done a lot of research and they know the market, and Trophy Park is nowhere near being developed.
No, I understand that. I mean, it's out there, at this point, who knows if it's going to happen? Just curious, I guess my concern is, this project has been changed, quite a few times. I'm just kind of concerned that, it gets completed and there's not a big hole in the ground that residents have to look at for the next, 5-10 years or whatever the case might be, I guess one question that also popped up was, you're talking about this green energy and, you guys touted all the benefits of it, which is great. And I'm sure it sounds like it's a pretty good thing, but, what are the potential downsides of this green energy tech that you guys were talking about? Because there's always a downside to something. There's, and maybe that's a question for the specialist that was speaking earlier. I can't remember his name.
Spano up to answer that. Is he still here? Jim? The question was, are there any potential, you have to come to a microphone. Are there any potential downsides to the energy project that you've described?
There's no downside outside of what one would expect if equipment went down and we had to rely back on the grid. That's the only downside, is that we'd have to take some dirty power into the project.
That's the only there's no other potential downsides to this technology. I'm not too familiar with this. I'm just trying to kind of understand.
Yeah, this is what we call bankable technology, meaning that it's been in the field, it's been tested, and you're able to get it financed through a traditional lender.
all right, with that, Mr. Jolliffe, I've got to cut at that point.
See, this is what I don't like. The public needs to be heard on this. There's a lot of folks that aren't happy about this, and cutting us off, it's not my problem that you're only going to give us 5 minutes. You need to hear everything the public has to say.
Respectfully, Mr. Jolliffe, two of your questions were far outside the testimony that was offered tonight. The third one was close by Mr. Spano. They were both indulged by the applicant. So from the
No, they
board
weren't really indulged. You didn't answer my question, but anyway, thank you for your time.
indulged the question in a respectful manner. You will still have opportunity in the future as this application proceeds to ask additional questions and ultimate commentary. But at this point, I have to cut you off and move on to the next public member. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Anthony, who do you have next? I still see 7 hands up. No, not gonna be that long.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi, yes.
Who is this? Is this?
This is Joyce Jolliffe.
Oh, okay.
Prompted me next.
Yep.
All
If
right.
you'd kindly raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the questions you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please.
Joyce Jolliffe, Jolli, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, E. 5 Holly Tree Court, Jackson, New Jersey. I live 323 feet from the project.
Okay, Ms. Jolliffe, if you would be so kind, would you please direct your questions as to testimony that has been presented tonight?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so just a couple of clarity things. The apartments that originally were supposed to be connected to the MS Center. Originally, Mr. Cardinality had testified in front of this board back in January and in 2019 that they would be treated at the MS Center. However, today, it seems like that has been opposite. So I just want to clarity, there will be no treatment at this MS Center. Is that correct?
Treatment, no patients are being treated at the research center. It's strictly research, no patient treatment.
Will patients be brought to the research center for research?
Mr. Beal, you gotta come up. I don't know the answer to these questions.
That's fine.
He'll be,
The people that will be coming to the research center will be people that will go into a Category 7 magnet MRI to see where the lesions are in the brain with the MS patients while they're alive.
So they will be research subjects.
I don't know what the subject is, but we need to know where the lesion is in the brain while the person's alive. Category 7 magnet's a very expensive magnet. There isn't any one.
I'm fully aware of what that is. Thank you. So there will be no treatment. Only the treatment will be done then at Center State or other facilities, correct?
Yeah, we're not, at this time, we're not proposing to do any treatment. I have not heard from any of the researchers that we need to do treatment. Strictly be looking for where the lesions are in the brain.
Okay. So in the past, you have testified, and actually in front of this board, that phase 2 was going to fund your MS Center. However, recently in an article that I had read that you had a interview with NewJersey.com, Steve Cerneski was the person. You were saying that the apartments are now going to be funding your MS Center. So is it the phase 2, the warehouses that fund the MS Center, or the apartments?
look, I'm not sure it's relevant. Again, it's not a zoning issue where the money goes or how it's funded,
Yeah,
but
Well, absolutely, it does, because of the fact that it has to do with the phases, and it has to do with the fact that you are moving it into phase 1, and it talks about of how, in fact, if you need certain approvals because you've changed things, and the GDP is different now, then yes, it does have to do with that, and I think
So let me, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think to the extent that there's been representations made in the past I don't have the old resolution in front of me, about, and I'm not trying, for the chance that this sounds facetious, I don't mean it that way. But the dream has always been, right, that this project at the end of the day was governed by some need. That's how I see it. I'm speaking.
Mr. Gertner, you should not be testifying.
Testifying, I'm trying to help you by asking the question. And the question is, I'm suggesting to the chairman that in fact the applicant do answer the question to the extent that he's made representations that in fact the project was driven ultimately to produce funding for this dream of the MS Center.
Yeah, so I'd like to know where the funding is coming from.
And so, Mr. Cardinal, you would answer the question to the best of your ability. Please.
Mission of this project is for me to end MS. And I am taking my money, buying land, bringing a project to Jackson, which is probably going to be one of the highest rateable projects in Jackson. And the fact that I personally am going to take my money to kill MS, whether it's because of a warehouse or an apartment or a surf taco or the coffee you drink at Starbucks, has nothing to do with timing. My timing is to kill MS tomorrow. So whatever it takes for me to do to kill MS quickly is what I'm going to do. The fact that the project has changed, it's gotten better every time. So I don't understand why the timing of what I do towards killing MS has any impact, because no one in the United States but me right now is trying to kill it with a project like this.
Actually, you're incorrect. And in fact, I have a disease that is almost identical to MS. And I am disgusted by this project. As you've come many times to a treatment facility or a research facility, as you've said with your wife, as I have many times. No, let me speak. I still have a few more minutes.
This is not time for comment. Time only.
Mr. Gertner, you have
Ms. Joliffe, if you can hear us, this is not time for comment.
then you should allow me to do so. Mr. Gertner, last meeting squished comment and questions together. So this is the same thing.
No, it's not. It's not even close. Ms. Joliffe, your time is up. You'll get time again at another time to comment. We are moving on to the next public member. Thank you for your time. Anthony, let's go to the next person. All right, members of the public, as you're listening, it is my intention to take 3 more, and then we are terminating the public comment for tonight. So whoever's up next, I don't know who you have up next, Anthony. Ed V. Ed V, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Can you kindly raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the questions you're about to present to the applicant or the board will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please?
First name's Edward, last name's Vinkowski, V as in Victor, I-E-N-C-K-O-W-S-K-I. Address is 256 East Colliers Mill Road in Plumstead, which is right on the border of Jackson near Colliers Mill. 5 miles as the crow flies, probably 8 miles taken Hawken Road.
Vinkowski, thank you very much. It is getting late. We have the 5-minute limit. Would you kindly direct your questions to Mr. Alfieri or his witnesses, please?
I will do that. I just want to thank whoever in the board earlier said your head's spinning, because my head is spinning with all these changes that were brought up tonight. I'll try to stick to what I heard. And I'm going to run out of time because I had so many questions, but Mr. Borden tonight, again, as he has in previous meetings, keeps emphasizing that this property has been zoned for commercial use and destination use for 40 years. I guess, so my question to Mr. Borden is then why did it need a special spot zoning 2 years ago to have it fit into this vision?
That's, again, I don't know how, the town council adopted the zoning ordinance, so I don't know how Mr. Borden can answer that question.
Well, then I guess I would ask Mr. Borden not to say that it's been in place for 40 years because it hasn't. Well, that's the end of that.
Only been in place for, this overlay zone's only been in place for about 2 years.
I know, but he said in 3 meetings now that I've sat through, he's put it out there as if it's been in play for 40 years. And you play back the tapes. Let's see, next question's traffic related. I understand we'll have ability to ask traffic questions at the next meeting. It wasn't clear to me how, I heard stuff about, a lot of other people were asking about pedestrian traffic on the site. So I think the question I might have is going to be answered by the board, by the board to ask those questions. So I'll move on to the next. I was intrigued by the discussion about the traffic, the sign, where a sign wanted to be raised from, there was a 16-foot limit, but it was previously approved for 33, and now they want 45. And the question was asked by a board member, are you within 200 feet of the, are you going to be more than 200 feet away from the traffic light? And the answer was no. And so my question is, if you move the sign more than 200 feet to be in compliance with that rule, you probably don't need it to be as high as you want it to be. And I just don't understand why we keep looking for, asking for relief on things when we should just follow the ordinances that are in place that have good rules for good reason. So why don't we do that? That's my question.
I don't know, Ian. You want to come up? I'll give it to you. No, the question was, why do we have to have the sign less than 200 feet from the traffic signal? Why can't we make it comply?
Because we're trying, the location of the sign is relevant to the surrounding road system. We are trying to place the sign near the intersection of Pine Drive, which is also near the interchange with Route 195, so that the traffic exiting 195, heading westbound on Monmouth Road can see the sign.
So that goes against the requirement for it to be 200 feet away. Why couldn't you put 2 signs that are 16 feet high, one on either side, 200 feet away?
This is a project of over almost 300 acres, the largest commercial project in the history of Jackson Township, the largest project ever to be in the history of Jackson Township, because there's no other land available near this size or location. So I think it's only suitable that the sign matches the scale of the project, both in location, scope, and design. And that's what we've proposed.
Yeah, I just think the residents probably want you to start following rules, that's all. I'm done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vinkowski. All right. We have, who's next, Anthony? Deborah Ann. All right, so Deborah Ann, you're next, and then we're going to take one more public comment for the evening, and then we are done. Deborah Ann, are you there?
All right, hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, but we can't see you, Deborah.
Okay, I've tried twice to show myself, but it's not working. All right, here we go. How's that?
Okay, you're there.
Okay, I would appreciate if you have some patience with me this evening because I am disabled myself and I am having some difficulty at this late hour speaking.
All right, Mr. Gertner's going to talk to you first. Hang on.
Okay, Mr. Gardner, go ahead.
If you kindly raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the questions you're about to present to the applicant will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please?
My name is Deborah Scatuccio, and my last name is spelled Scatuccio. And I live at 24 Plymouth Court in Jackson. And I live a few miles from the project, but I have about 20 friends and family members who live right next to it, so I spend a lot of time over there.
Okay, Ms. Scatuccio, if I pronounced your name correctly,
Yes, you may call me Deborah if you wish.
would you please then direct your questions to Mr. Alfieri as to the testimony that you've heard tonight?
Well, my first question is, when are the residents going to be allowed to make comments and not just ask questions? Because you said you're going to give us the opportunity to do that at a later date, and we've been told that repeatedly, and we're still waiting.
Once the applicant has finished putting his entire case on, that means putting all of his witnesses on, and then presents the entire case to the board for decision. Then at that time, we open it up to the public, and then we listen to the comments of the public on the application, in addition to questions. But right now, we are not anywhere near having the applicant complete his application. So we try as best we can to get public questions to the testimony that has been presented tonight. And that's why we do it that way.
Do you have an approximate idea when this will be? Because for some of us, it is very difficult to sit up this late on these meetings.
I wish I had a crystal ball, Ms. Scatuccio, that I would be able to look at and tell you when everything would be done and on what date that would occur, but I cannot. There are simply too many variables in play, and it's impossible for me or any of the board members to predict when this application will be complete.
Okay, now my next question is, you said that we could email the zoning officer with information. Do you have an email for him, or would that just be on the website? And is that Mr. Purpura?
Yes.
Okay. My next question is also partially a comment. I knew myself, because I'm disabled, about the limitations to housing projects for the disabled. If Mr. Cardinality Enterprises is such a large conglomerate, how did they not know what I already knew about restrictions for disabled housing in the state of New Jersey under ADA and other laws?
Well, I didn't know he was a conglomerate, but.
Well, Cardinality Enterprise, all right, it's an enterprise, and he's putting millions of his own dollars into this project, so.
Right, so his testimony was when he didn't know until he started to develop the Manalapan project, the complexity and the maze that one has to go through to get funding for the residents who need to qualify for affordable housing and special needs. So he didn't know.
Well, I find that ironic that a lot of people who are disabled already know that information. I do admire the fact that he's trying to help people with MS, but how are you going to protect the people who are sick, who are living in this housing, from the exhaust fumes from the diesel engines that are going to be available 24/7 on the corner? And I found a research project that was peer-reviewed from New York, California, and please excuse me, I'm having troubles tonight, and France, called The Prevalence of Wide Area Impacts Downwind of Freeways from Pre-Sunrise Stable Atmospheric Conditions. And I actually called and spoke to the people who did this research, and they said that the diesel fumes can waft up to 1,000 feet over residential homes and make people who are already very sick even sicker. So how are you going to prevent this from happening to these people who are going to be sick, living in these homes and living in the local area?
Well, I'm not sure if the question relates to the traffic on Route 537 or.
Well, it does, because the traffic is going to be coming from 537 with the trucks right around the entire project, exposing all the people who are there to the exhaust fumes from the diesel. And last time I was kind of mocked by the board for asking questions about this.
Ms. Scatuccio, I don't believe there was any testimony tonight from the applicant that was focused on what type of exhaust fumes might be generated by vehicles in or near the presence of the project. I don't know that that issue will be raised at all at any time during the application process. It may or may not, but at least as to tonight, there was no testimony in that regard, and thus, unless the applicant knows something that he can offer to you, I suspect it's not an appropriate question for this evening.
Well, when will it be appropriate, sir?
There-
Can
there-
you tell me when I should ask the question?
Well-
Because I've tried to before and I don't get an answer.
Well, I would suspect at a minimum, when the application is complete, and if that is an issue that you wish to again raise, and it forms a basis for you to seek denial of their application, then you can submit that comment at the time of final hearing. Or I believe Mr. Gertner has stated earlier that there is a process by which you can submit questions for the applicant to answer in the application process. So, but tonight, the question is really very premature and not pertinent to what you heard tonight. So in that,
Even though it has to do with the traffic light and the traffic coming off the road into the project?
not yet, that's correct.
And,
Even though you spoke about the traffic light and the traffic.
and there's no housing in this application.
Okay, and then one more comment I have, and it's also a question. Mr. Cardinelli brings up at every single presentation about the former lawsuit. The lawsuit was mostly about having 3-story lighting into the homes of families all night long. And you also promised that you would not put bamboo into the area because of the restrictions that the state has. And you brought that up this evening about the bamboo using as a buffer. New Jersey has very strict regulations about bamboo usage. How is that going to be part of the application tonight? I don't understand. That was brought up before. Is
Well-
that under this application or another one?
It's this application. When bamboo was discussed with the Anderson Road residents, we had offered to put bamboo buffering along Anderson Road to block the lights from the golf facility, and the Anderson Road residents did not want bamboo on Anderson Road. The bamboo proposed tonight is nowhere near Anderson Road.
But the state of New Jersey has a great number of restrictions about the bamboo being used on private projects. So how is that going to be allowed? I don't understand that.
Ms. Scatuccio, I have to cut you off. We are way over time.
Well, could you ask that question before you cut me off?
We are done for tonight. You'll have to come back another time and present your questions and ultimate concerns. So with that, I appreciate you coming on, but I'm going to take one last public comment. We are way past 11 o'clock, and then we are terminating the session for this evening. Thank you, Ms. Scatuccio. Tony, who's our last one? Okay. Vincent, are you there? All right, Vincent Scatuccio, are you there? Hello? Vincent Scatuccio, can you hear us? We can see.
Yes, I'm here. Okay. Sir, if you kindly raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the questions you're about to present to the board or the applicant will represent the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your address, please.
Vincent Scatuccio, Scatuccio, 24 Plymouth Court, Jackson, New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Scatuccio, as I've indicated, you are our last public comment for this evening. You've heard testimony tonight. Would you kindly direct your questions to the testimony that has been presented?
Yes, I'd like to speak with the gentleman who talked about the solar farms.
And while he's coming up to the mic, a lot of the board asked questions tonight about solar, but they missed the most important question. So the question is on your power plant, your CHP, your 6 megawatt power plant that you plan to put in along with the solar. Okay, what is the nitrogen oxide limits of that plant?
I would,
NOx.
you'd have to speak to our engineers.
No, you don't know. Okay, you're putting in a power plant in the middle of Jackson. Okay, I worked for PSE&G for 30 years. Now, anything above, you're at your limit of 6 megawatts. Anything above 15 megawatts requires special pollution controls. So your 6 megawatt plant is going to have no pollution controls. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not an engineer. I don't have.
Why don't we get a real engineer to sit there and talk about it? Because obviously you're not an engineer, you're a politician. Okay.
I'm not a politician nor an engineer, sir.
Okay. What about respiratory issues from NOx fumes?
Nor am I a doctor, sir.
Okay. So your testimony tonight, as far as I'm concerned, is BS because you never addressed the real issue. I have no problem with the solars. I applaud you for going into solar, but you have not addressed the issue of your power plant. And that's 6 megawatts of you're putting in 9 megawatts of solar plus 6 more of gas power generated. Okay. You're putting a power plant in the middle of Jackson. Do you know PSE&G and JCP&L don't even put that size power unit in for their peak units across the state where they need power?
You're incorrect, sir. We've actually installed a system for PSE&G.
Well, that's great. But you're installing this one here and it has no pollution controls.
I did not state that, sir.
Well, I'm telling you because it's below 15 megawatts. Why don't you do your research and figure it out? And this board needs to be address these issues because you're being told BS by these people and being blasted because they're giving you bad information and polluting our area of Jackson. Besides all this the trucks my wife talked about. Okay, this is another pollution area that's going on phase 3. Okay, by the warehouses where the other pollution's being presented.
Sir, this is a clean energy plant.
Yeah, you're being clean energy baloney, okay? You know for a fact that under 15 megawatts, there's no pollution controls. You're exhausting 100% of NO2.
All right, Mr. Scatuccio, thank you very much for your questions and input. We are finished for the evening. Thank you, everybody. Can I have a motion to?
Well, no,
I'm sorry.
don't, wait.
Got time to
Mr.
go?
Paporo.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, we got to skip.
Mr. Alfieri, can you get some of those additional renderings, et cetera, done?
Yes.
To carry this 2 weeks?
Quickly, yes.
All right, so for members of the public and the board, this matter, application number 4, Cardinal and Jackson Crossing 2, amended final site plan 776-4 with minor subdivision 1411, block 3001, lots 2, 3, and 4. This matter shall be carried to the April 21st, 2021 meeting without the need for further notice. The public is directed to the municipal website and municipal postings related to access to the meeting. He has waived time
And 7 PM.
and the meeting will begin at 7 PM.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Are we
Good night,
done?
everyone.
We're done? Good. Can I have a motion to adjourn and go home? All in favor? Aye, thank you. We're out of here.